The Noble Queen, a Shadow Slave Fanfic Chapter 101 to 125. Noble did end up seeing the second battle of the semifinals, but not with Fireshing. Instead, she was joined by her family in her living room while eating dinner on their couches. The match was a battle for the ages, or so Dimmy and Cycla said as the group all settled in to watch. It was rather gruesome entertainment for a meal, at least in the professor's opinion. However, Fort, the boys, and Honey did not seem bothered by the display, and she had to let the matter rest. As the fight went on, the family became more and more engrossed in the action. Why can't unorganized laundry just cut down Thorai? He's got all the stealth. Brock had his hands up punching at the air between bites. She has that weird memory of hers, Honey answered her brother with a superior air. What does it do? Blaze studied the naginata on the screen. The librarians are going on the defensive every time Thorai uses it. It blinds any opponent who looks at it, Noble answered. Fort shot her a glance. Oh really? His mouth twisted into a mischievous grin. The professor gave a tight smile in response. That is what I believe, yes. It is a good theory, Dad, Honey nodded. It would explain why they keep having to look away. Winking covertly at his wife, Fort clicked his tongue. Your mother always knows more about these things than I do. Mom's pretty awesome. Brock sent his mother a fist bump punch. Dad is too. Blaze came to his father's defense. I agree, Noble chuckled. And as fearsome as Thorai's blade. Look at that. The time-snatching awakened stepped in to keep unorganized laundry from digging into Snowmobile's skull. On the screen, it looked like the daring duelist was deflected by the lady's naginata, but Noble knew that some time alteration had occurred to make it happen. Nick would have never been so sloppy. Maybe I should have warned him. Noble had considered letting him know about Thorai's tricky aspect. The perceptive librarian had been the one to rope her into the competition in the first place. It would be a shame not to fight him at least once. But Noble also felt like telling Nickel about Thorai's aspect was sort of cheating. It wasn't against the rules, yet it didn't feel right to interfere. So the professor had remained silent. Even without the information, Unorganized Laundry and Izayoi_Ni were holding their ground. They did not have it easy. Paradise and Thorai had gotten their timing down to an art. Too many of the librarians' hits were avoiding their intended targets. Tensions were running high. That was good. Noble wanted to see what the two would do under pressure. Izayoi_Ni's impeccable capacity for learning caused her to rarely make the same mistake twice. Which is why it was very strange to see her struggling with the same types of problems over and over during this duel. Her elegant kimono sailed around her when she struck Sleepless across the jaw with her foot. Since it was not a critical hit, the bone-jarring smack landed, knocking the vengeful fighter backward. The two-handed blade in her hand lengthened into a spear, poised to impale Sleepless without a second thought. As Noble expected, it missed. The thoughtful librarian narrowed her gaze. Instead of making another calculated move, Izayoi_Ni began to strike wildly. She's lost her mind. Blaze gasped. No, keep watching. Noble smiled broadly. I think Iza's figured it out. The sleeves of her kimono spun out like the petals of a violet flower as the learned fighter continued her assault. It was as violent as it was bewitching to watch. The angry awakened responded to her attack, barely holding his own. At the same time, Nickel, who went by Unorganized Laundry, was fighting off Paradise in Red and Snowmobile. The determined librarian moved so silently that he was hard to track. That was part of what made him so deadly. One moment he would be attacking from the front, and then, noting the slightest change by his opponent, he would move in a blur to stab from the rear. His versatility in weapons was also remarkable. Laundry always seemed to know just what weapon would get the job done. Although only one weapon type memory could be called at a time, he had the skills and timing to seamlessly change between his arsenal without getting injured. Just now, with 4 opponents, that was a nearly impossible feat. So Laundry selected a pair of commas as his primary offense. The two weapons held deadly daggers out of one side and curved blades on the other, allowing the duelist to flick his wrist and switch out his form of attack. The small handles sported knuckle bars, allowing Laundry to use one comma as a shield while the other struck out like a viper's fang. It was the versatility of the weapon that was helping him just now. Keeping Snowmobile at close range, Unorganized Laundry was preventing his spell attacks and fending off Paradise's oddly accurate maneuvers. But Nickel was clearly frustrated, livid even. More than one of his hits should have ended members of the other cohort, and the blinding effect of the naginata was only complicating things. You got this, Nick. Noble muttered. She shook her fork in the air like a tiny sword. The man seemed to miraculously hear her, for when Isa began her wild attempt to overcome Sleepless, Laundry suddenly mirrored his partner's technique. Like two hurricanes, they went after the other team, working as much on intuition as wits. Now, Isa screamed, mimicking Paradise's signal. The two librarians struck at the same time at two different targets. Four Eye took the signal in stride and rewound time. Both the two-handed spear and commas missed. However, the librarians had anticipated this move and instantly changed their tactics. Izayoi_knee shortened her spear back into a sword, and Laundry shifted his weight to bring his dominant hand upwards. He slashed to the side in a vicious circle. Sleepless has been eliminated. Snowmobile has been eliminated. Paradise in red has been eliminated. Sensing the end was near, both Noble and Fort had sprung to cover the twins' eyes. Crimson splattered all over the flotilla as blood and heads spilled onto the ground. Only Paradise had managed to keep his due to a new memory in the form of a massive neck guard. Still, the hit by unorganized Laundry's blade had been fatal. Die, die, die. The boys chanted as they pushed their parents' hands away. I would like to point out that we don't condone murder in this house. Noble released Blaze to rub her forehead. Thankfully her plate of food hadn't fallen from her lap. Don't worry, Mom, they aren't really dying, Brock chirped, amused by his mother's disgust. On the screen, the action was quickly coming to a close. With 3 of the members of Dawnbreak out of commission, Thor-Eye was outnumbered once again. I wonder if she is having flashbacks, Noble mused. If she was, they didn't last long. Thor-Eye got in a fatal wound on Isa only to receive the curved end of one of the commas in her back. Desperate for victory, Laundry did not hesitate to cruelly twist the blade. Thor-Eye has been eliminated. Dawnbreak has been defeated. The librarians have won. Yes, Noble cheered, surprising her family. What? I cannot cheer for my friends. But there was a deeper motivation behind her excitement. Queen Bee and unorganized Laundry at last would meet. A smile crept onto her face. Bring it. Again in the starry void, Queen Bee adjusted her armor for the 5th time. The announcers must have been taking extra time building up the finale. I wish they would hurry up and get on with it. Bee resisted the urge to pace back and forth. She tapped her fingers impatiently against the fraudulent facade. I know it is strange coming from me, but you have to calm down, Fire smiled. She too felt anxious, but her friend was downright jittery. This is the reason I hate tournaments. I hate the waiting. Let me get into the action and get things started. Bee was relieved when the voice of the Dreamscape interrupted her incoming tirade. Prepare to enter Dream. Here we go. Fireshing squeezed her partner's hand quickly. The void faded and the final dream of the Dreamscape team tournament took form. Noble half expected it to be some semblance of the House of Knights Citadel, but what came into view was not a giant floating ship. Below her feet, a large, lustrous crystal platform was surrounded by a golden sea, like it was reflecting a perpetually setting sun. The glassy floor also looked yellow, but Bee guessed that it was only taking on the color of the water below. The crystal was so clear that the participants actually looked like they were standing on the shining sea itself. Walking on water for the final battle. Seems fitting. The queen could not help but approve. Her only real concern was the edge where the crystal floor met the water. It was a nearly invisible seam and could prove problematic for anyone who couldn't just float over it. The librarians manifested beside the blazing bees. Clad in a kimono and lightweight tunic respectively, Isa and Laundry took in the scene with expectation. All around the arena, mighty ships housed spectators. They looked like the luxury liners of old, with balconies for people to enjoy the spectacle. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Docked at one end of the crystalline island, a lone yacht bobbed. This ship looked much more rustic and grand. It had very few occupants, but Noble recognized one of them easily. It was the saint who created the Dreamscape. Thane was on board. Noble had seen the saint only a handful of times before, but the flamboyant silk garments and thick makeup made Thane hard to forget. Next to the Transcendent, a man not far from Noble's age stood and waved amicably to the crowd. The master's indigo eyes and dark hair with tinges of blue starkly contrasted the other member of the House of Night. There you are, unorganized Laundry muttered under his breath ominously. Of course, he would try to psych me out knowing I cannot talk back. Noble smirked. Nickel had gone to some trouble to get her to enter the tournament and it had taken even greater effort to get to this point. Even before the battle had begun, the librarian was using mind games. The queen turned her head slowly toward him to give an aloof stare, but he hadn't bothered to look her way to gloat. Nickel was looking steadily toward the platform, unwilling to spare her a glance. I don't know whether to be impressed or insulted, Bee studied Laundry's face. His resolute expression did not match the emotional spikes she sensed inside him. The man was very good at hiding his feelings. Was unorganized Laundry nervous about the fight or about being under the Transcendent's gaze? This was Thane's kingdom, and all of them were merely visiting. Has Nick not seen the saint before? The librarians had won the tournament the year prior, but the Queen did not think that Thane had attended the group finale. Bee wasn't sure if the pair had been at the opening ceremony either. Perhaps it truly was his first time seeing a Transcendent up close and personal. Never figured Nick would be the starstruck type, Bee shrugged slightly. It was none of her business who Laundry idolized. To be fair, that kind of power should give every awakened at least some pause. On the raised deck, Thane stood slowly. The voice of the Dreamscape welcomed the teams and launched into a solemn speech. On this day we are gathered to witness the making of history. When it was complete, the two teams faced each other and acknowledged the match. May the best team win, Fireshing said pleasantly. As long as that team is us, I agree. Isa nodded with a playful grin. Unorganized Laundry and Queen Bee simply stared at one another. Neither of them had anything to add. With the pleasantries past, all four duelists summoned their weapons. For a moment, the crystal platform reflected the flurry of sparks. A familiar estoc and spear appeared in Bee's and Fire's hands. The unlikely end and aching ember had gotten them this far. It seemed unfair to trade them in for the final battle. Izayoi_ni must have felt the same, for her weapon, which Bee knew was called the Curious Cutlass, manifested in her delicate hands. The two-handed sword could become a spear at a moment's notice, making it ideal for both short and long-range attacks. Unorganized Laundry was the last to call forth a weapon. With a smirk, he summoned a steel scimitar. The perceptive duelist could have brought out any number of weapons in his arsenal. The curved sword meant he was seeking close-range combat. His message was clear, this was personal. Queen Bee stood opposite the man, wondering at how he wore no armor. In addition to camouflaging the awakened, the tunic surely had some protective quality. However, the garment would be no match for the unlikely end. All I need is one good hit. The Queen sent a look toward their illustrious hosts. The contingency overseeing the event was now sitting back comfortably in their seats on their yacht. Nothing more remained to be done. The duelists were welcome to proceed at any time. Fire. Queen Bee sent a final message. Let's do this. Fireshing lit the tip of her spear. The metal glowed white-hot. All at once, the four awakened jumped into action like a sprung trap. The outbreak might have looked like chaos to those watching, but to the four seasoned duelists, it was only the opening act to an intricate dance. Queen Bee struck out with her estoc while Laundry's scimitar sliced through the air at her abdomen. The two weapons collided and spat sparks onto the crystal floor. With neither blade gaining the advantage, the two were forced apart by the sheer power crash. Beside them, Fireshing shot her fiery tip at the lavender skirt of her opponent's kimono, hoping to disable Isa before she could become mobile. However, the well-read awakened had memorized the move from one of Fire's previous battles and had already studied 7 different counters. The one she settled on was a downward motion with her cutlass while pressing her shoulder into Fire's chest. The move not only stopped Isa from being impaled but also prevented the fiery awakened from following up with a ball of flame when the two weapons clashed. Around them, the crowd roared. The battle was just beginning. Unlike most duels, which usually fanned out quickly, the four combatants stayed in a compact group. Instead of 2 separate matches, it was one titanic brawl. Queen Bee and Fireshing found themselves on the inner ring with Unorganized Laundry and Izayoi_ni circling. The librarians had little defense against Fire's long-range ability, so they worked hard to keep her wrangled into a tight ball. Noble had contemplated asking Nickel or Ren to spar with her before the competition just to see how she would fare. However, since she had never offered before, the professor was afraid that it might make her friends suspicious, especially considering her close friendship with Sarai in the waking world. So this was the first chance Bee had to experience the librarians firsthand. A smile formed under her fraudulent facade. They are trying to herd us like sheep. Fire sent the message through the other's voice. Then let's not give them the pleasure of slaughtering us. The floating duelist chuckled before adding. They are good but not going full strength. Either they are feeling us out or they are wanting this to last because that will be more fun. Or both, which is what the Queen suspected. She couldn't blame them. Now that the nerves were gone and she was in the action, Bee was determined to have a good time. A few harrowing exchanges occurred between 4 combatants. Well, they looked harrowing from the outside. For the seasoned duelists, the bouts were barely worth mentioning. Each was merely a test to see how much the other was willing to show off their ability. The 4 fighters were calm and collected as they moved about the crystal floor. With all the skill involved, no one had gotten hurt or even begun to sweat. The finals looked more like a waltz than a deadly melee. Enough chit-chat. Queen Bee kept her face neutral. She did not want to give unorganized laundry any opportunity to perceive what would come next. On my mark, Fire swung her spear to avoid the cutlass as it lengthened in Izayoi_Nee's hands. Ready, the floating awakened checked to make sure her charm was in place. It was. Now, the blazing bees moved in unison to repel their opponents. Queen Bee threw essence into the enchantment of the unlikely end as she struck out at Laundry. The tip of the sword buzzed, ready to sting. Simultaneously Fireshing called forth a hurricane of fire. The sudden inferno repelled both of the librarians, who wished to avoid being roasted by the sweltering flames. The heat of the battle suddenly shifted. Iza dashed off with Fireshing in pursuit, leaving Laundry and Bee to face each other unhindered. Even though the queen had tried to obscure her intentions, her opponent had been able to read her movement. He circled around as she came through the flames and avoided the tip of her blade. Why does Nick have to be so perceptive? Bee repositioned herself to take another stab at the man's torso, this time without activating the unlikely end's enchantment. The man blocked the stroke and shot forth one of his own with the scimitar. Taking the easy hit on his tunic, Laundry used his lightning-fast reflexes to test the woman's gilded armor. But Bee's attack had been a trap. When the deadly scimitar slipped under her guard, she shifted her torso to make the move a glancing blow. The queen did not stop there. Before Nickel could adjust his momentum, Bee slammed the hilt of her estoc in the space between his outstretched arms and pulled. The sudden action wrested the scimitar from Laundry's grasp, sending it skating until it fell off the edge of the crystal floor. Thane peeked over the edge of his ship to watch it clatter into the sea before being dismissed in a rain of sparks. Bee did not have that luxury. After ripping the blade from her opponent's grasp, she attempted to follow it up with a deadly swipe to the side. The camouflaged awakened darted, receiving the edge of estoc alongside his stomach rather than in it. The blade cut at the fabric of his tunic, making a small scratch on the stealthy duelist. The queen succeeded in drawing first blood, but it came at a cost. Unable to move away fast enough, Bee felt Laundry's sharp elbow slam into her cheek. It didn't have as much power as if he had punched her, but the force of the blow sent her head reeling backward. The floating duelist barely pulled it back before getting a kick to her armored chest. Laundry's weapon was gone, but that did not mean he was defenseless. His body was incredibly powerful as well. Flying backward, Bee did all she could to stop herself before reaching the edge of the transparent floor. The queen was heading straight for the saint and his illustrious guests. There was no way she was going to let herself be thrown into the side of their ship. While all of this was an illusion, she didn't want to imagine what would happen if the saint's boat suddenly got a human-sized hole in the hull. Hopefully, it would self-heal and be fine, but it was better for that to never be an issue in the first place. Her levitation skills were good, but they were still subject to the forces of nature, and since she lacked the advantage of friction with the ground, counteracting the powerful hit required extra effort. Bee had just enough strength. Her heel came to the platform's edge and stopped just short of hovering over the sea. Phew. Thankfully, Laundry had not pursued her. He was using the precious seconds to call forth his scimitar. Or so Bee thought at first. The man was proficient in dozens of weapons. With Bee currently at a distance, it seemed he was done with the sword and had switched tactics. In the librarian's hand, a jade shuriken formed. Its 6 points were laced with something purple and ominous. One side of Laundry's mouth tipped upward, and his eyes flashed with mischief. Bee narrowed her gaze. Those blades are poisonous. I would bet my life on it. The professor inside Bee wanted to analyze the memory from an educational standpoint. Would the poison harm the body, the mind, or both? Better you ask him later and not find out right now. The mental tangent distracted the floating duelist from what was coming. Laundry flicked his wrist, sending the murderous star straight for Bee's injured cheek. There was no time to move out of the way, so she bent her knees and ducked instead. Hopefully, the memory couldn't curve and would continue on its straight path over her head. Bee wanted to kick herself for not being better prepared for the attack. The woman was having too much fun, and that kind of foolishness would cause her to lose the match. If she survived this moment, the queen was determined not to be caught off guard again. Bee balled herself as tightly to the ground as she could while the shining shuriken streaked across the sky. It flew past the queen and out of the stadium, right into the silken garment of Thane's arm. The Transcendent looked down at the torn sleeve. Instantly, the shuriken dissolved into a rain of sparks before it could be removed. Left behind, a trail of crimson tinged with purple formed on Thane's exposed skin. A hush fell over the crowd. Surprised by the sudden silence, Fire and Iza stopped their feud to gawk. The red-headed duelist stared in shock at the scene. She knew saints could bleed, but actually seeing it was an entirely different matter. They were supposed to be the pinnacles of strength, yet one was before her injured. What happened? Forgive me. Unorganized Laundry dropped to one knee. It was an accident, the Transcendent answered slowly. Fireshing and Izayoi_ni exchanged glances. Laundry had done this. How was that even possible? What kind of weapon must he possess to bring about such an injury? He was only an awakened. The possibilities overwhelmed Fireshing. Suddenly drowsy, she grasped her head. Something was seriously wrong. The world was shaking, or at least she was. It felt as if everything might break apart. Fire fell to one knee. Her body and mind felt at odds with one another. What is happening? Thane clapped, and the world came back into focus. As I said, it was an accident. The saint stood at the front of the ship with open arms. Proceed. When a Transcendent speaks, you listen. Standing, Fireshing worked to shake off the nausea that had gripped her. The break was over. There was no time to think any further. Iza broke from her trance and rushed toward the Auburn awakened. Fireshing was all that Bee could do to warn her friend. She had her own struggle in the form of a powerful pile of clothes. The call was what Fire needed to come back to herself. Seeing the saint be injured was a shock, but they were still in the arena and this was still the tournament finals. Izayoi_ni smiled shyly, her gorgeous face masking the brilliant mind beneath. She spun the cutlass at her side while charging at her fiery foe. The two women clashed in an explosion of power. Fireshing sent the aching ember into Iza's shoulder. The learned librarian rolled back, but not quite enough. The searing heat made her scream. In response, she dug the cutlass into Fire's cuirass at her waist. The leather protection barely held its shape, and her hip beneath felt like it would come out of its socket. Disengaging, Fire sent a ball of flame at her dark-haired adversary. Iza lunged under the inferno and dashed forward, lengthening her cutlass into its spear form. The two shafts struck against each other, neither one willing to break under the pressure. If something did not change soon, the ladies would remain in a stalemate. And for a long while they did. Izayoi_ni had memorized all of Fireshing's signature moves. It did not matter what the fiery awakened did, her opponent had a counter ready. The battle raged on with neither able to gain the upper hand. It was like a struggle between the tide and the sand. Each time one gained any ground, the other would strike back with equal force. The need to preserve her essence but also end the duel quickly weighed heavily on Fireshing's mind. She had already seen a saint be injured by one of the librarians. The longer things went, the more likely it would be that the next catastrophic occurrence would end her quest for victory. Iza was a champion for a reason. She was truly a phenom. Fire could feel her confidence begin to wane. Don't give up. Bee's voice resounded through the other's voice. While Fire wasn't sure if the message was actually meant for her or a leak of the woman's thoughts, the words were what she needed to hear. Stay strong, she chirped back. A fire lit in her eyes. It didn't matter how skilled the librarians were. Fireshing would give her all to defeat them. Iza took a shot at Queen Bee as the other pair floated by. The cutlass sent sparks across the back of the queen's black and gold armor. Oh no you don't. Fire aimed her spear at the purple kimono and shot a comet at her without a second thought. The ball engulfed all three of the others, momentarily hiding them from view. When the fire cleared, both the librarians had burn marks, but Bee was unscathed, mostly. Your hair. Fireshing couldn't hide her shock. Charred ends of silky brown hair sizzled on her friend's head. Don't worry, I have had worse haircuts, recently. Just the day before, Goldie and her gang had lopped off a chunk of the queen's hair in pursuit of her head. At least this time it was only the edges that were singed. That didn't stop Fire from feeling guilty. Her feelings always were troublesome. Bee. The woman's eyes went wide. She wanted to help her friend fend off an incoming attack. Fireshing hated seeing her teammate get hurt. Yet, she was waved off by her partner. Keep going. You have got her on the run. Nodding, Fire aimed again at Iza while the lovely librarian sought refuge. Unfortunately, There was no place to hide in the arena except behind other combatants. Laundry and Bee were blasted with a second blaze. Sorry. Fire blushed. Resolving not to hit her teammate again, Fireshing became more strategic in her attacks. Isa was very good at avoiding the flames and learned moves at a staggering speed. She seemed invincible, so tenacious. It's like she knows everything, Fire lamented to herself. She shot her spear toward Isa, but the brilliant woman dodged and retaliated. It took all of Fire's wits not to get caught by the insidious cutlass. Discouragement took root in Fire, but only for a moment. As Isa threatened to overwhelm her, Fireshing at last made a victory in her internal battle. Isa's mind is vast, but it is not all-knowing. I cannot give up. Fire just needed to keep after her. Keep throwing flames. Keep lashing out with the spear. If 100 strikes would not take down the librarian, then Fireshing would make 101. If Isa had all of her moves memorized, then the fiery awakened would just make up new moves. The only way to outthink a thinker would be to find a new line of thought. And Fireshing had just the idea in mind. A few moments before, Queen Bee turned around to have a front-row view of the small stream of blood staining Thane's satin garment. How sharp was the shuriken to pierce the skin of a transcendent? The woman was very glad that the star had missed her neck. Something that powerful would have torn her head clean from her shoulders. With a pale face, unorganized Laundry fell to one knee. He dipped his head. Forgive me. Thane's face remained unreadable beneath thick makeup. The voice of the Dreamscape answered in a measured tone. It was an accident. The shining golden sea around them wavered. Bee felt suddenly woozy. It wasn't like when Lost had messed with her perception. She felt on the precipice of waking up inside her pod. Bee was being pulled between two worlds. She steadied herself. What is going on? Those around her seemed to be having the same struggle. Confusion permeated the air. What could have caused such a disturbance? The Saint. Thane was the creator and sustainer of the Dreamscape. Without the Transcendent, this strange place between the waking world and the dream realm would cease to exist. While the rest of the participants were only there as a copy of their real bodies, Thane might have been physically present. If that was the case, then his injury was very real. That meant that the poisoned shuriken had dug into real flesh. Oh no. Looking down, Bee could see tiny cracks form in the crystalline floor. If the dream shattered around her, would she be stuck here or propelled into the waking world? Shooting a panicked look back to the Saint, Queen Bee opened her mouth to break her vow of silence. Thane held up a hand and the Dreamscape stopped its quivering. Queen Bee's relief was profound. The Saint clapped loudly. As I said, it was an accident. The Transcendent rose to his feet and spread his arms wide. The cut, covered in pus, was already beginning to heal. Proceed. The last word boomed a little too forcefully. Bee struggled not to cover her ears. She looked at unorganized Laundry. He was still bent in half. She frowned. Something felt off. The man's posture spoke of embarrassment, but his feelings were incongruous with his humble appearance. The Awakened had just injured the Dreamscape creator and possibly poisoned him, and Nickel was relieved. I have to be misreading the situation. Maybe Nick is just happy that Thane did not require justice for the injury. Bee sensed Isa's movement. She quickly warned her partner. Fireshing. The elegant Isa attacked with her blade, breaking the redhead Fireshing from her daze. They resumed their deadly duel, leaving the other pair behind. Unorganized Laundry rose from his knee with a vicious grin. Bee hardly recognized him. His emotions were brimming with murderous intent. Her position in the arena had caused him to wound a Saint. Laundry would not let such embarrassment go unanswered. He was after blood, hers. In a split second, Bee was already on top of her opponent. There was no way she was going to let him get a jump on her. Normally, she would have waited for her adversary to summon a weapon, but something inside the queen said that the courtesy would get her killed. So she attacked. Seeing her coming, Laundry moved out of the path of the unlikely end. It sang past his ear like a fatal melody. Resummoning the scimitar, the perceptive librarian shifted his stance and retreated with his back to the Saint. He no longer seemed intent on making sure Thane was watching his display. Something about his sudden change bothered the queen, but she did not have time to contemplate. Even before the memory was fully manifested, Laundry made an overhanded strike at her head. The blade solidified at the perfect moment, hitting against the unlikely end with measured precision. The pair raged around the field. Bee's fluidity and focus alongside her ability to change styles at will made her glide across the arena with ease. In contrast, Laundry was silent and sly, striking out like a serpent and then retreating at will. The battle of grace versus stealth was mesmerizing. With each passing minute, Queen Bee felt more like something was wrong. The more she pushed down the feeling, the more it came back in double force. Despite her placid expression, the mental strain was taxing. Don't give up, stay strong, Fireshing answered easily. The floating duelist had not meant to send the message but was very glad she did. Her teammate was alive and well. Bee could sense Isa coming up behind her, but there was little she could do about it. Feeling the cutlass strike her armor, the queen rolled her shoulder to let it slide off harmlessly. As she jumped around to answer the assault, Fire's voice rang in her mind. Oh no you don't. Unexpectedly, a ball of fire engulfed the trio. The queen held her breath and closed her eyes. Her charm would protect her from the pain, but that did not mean she wanted to inhale the heat. The fire cleared almost as quickly as it began. Laundry and Isa had whelps on their exposed skin, but Bee felt fine. Though what was that smell? Your hair, Fireshing gasped. While the librarians fell back, Bee felt her head with her gauntlet. She had been mid-jump when the ball came. It seemed the tips of her hair were out of range of the protection. She wrinkled her nose against the stench and chuckled softly. Don't worry, I have had worse haircuts, recently. Feeling the stealthy duelist's emotions, Bee turned just in time to block a dagger to her neck. He almost had her. A trickle of blood accompanied the stinging sensation. The queen winced, resisting the urge to cry out. At least it didn't seem to be covered in poison like the throwing stars. Bee, Fireshing had seen the display. Shaking her head, Queen Bee answered forcefully. Keep going, you have got her on the run. With neither of their opponents having a sorcery aspect, Fireshing was their strongest offense. The moment Isa had disengaged and moved away, she lost her main advantage. When the kimono-clad librarian tried her luck avoiding the blaze, Bee and Laundry were hit with another fireball. Sorry, Fire blushed. Queen Bee did not respond. The nagging sensation at the edge of her consciousness was crowding her thoughts. Something about Laundry's actions didn't make sense. He was not acting like the subdued academy librarian she knew. The ferocity in Nickel's eyes was frightening. Why should she be surprised by that? Didn't she have a persona in the Dreamscape as well? Yet, that persona was being neglected because Bee was facing off against two friends. She needed to regain her clarity. With a deep breath between strokes, Queen Bee allowed her eyes to shift colors freely. The release of emotion allowed her to regain her calm. It was time to get serious. The cadence of the battle shifted. Laundry could feel it too. He put some distance between himself and the other warrior as he switched out his weapon. This time it was a straight ninjutsu. Reflecting the sheen of the golden floor, the blade swung around either side of its wielder's body. Unorganized Laundry charged at his opponent in a blur. Blocking the sword with her own, Bee felt the reverberation all the way to her toes. Only a slight adjustment by her knees allowed her to keep her feet from the ground. My turn. Bee's eyes stopped their shifting. She whirled her estoc in an explosion of attacks. Her mind was solely focused on her opponent's destruction. The tenacious librarian fought back bravely, managing a second cut on Bee's cheek and many dents in her armor. However, slowly but surely, Laundry gave ground. While his strength lay in the quick and silent strike, Bee's advantage came with her stamina. And the longer the battle went on, the more that advantage came into play. Group battles always came with at least a minor break in between rounds. Laundry was used to huge bursts of energy followed by a period of rest. In contrast, it was possible in the individual dreams for one opponent after another to challenge a single adversary in a never-ending line. There were nights where Queen Bee had fought non-stop until morning. She was no stranger to pushing through fatigue. That is what she did now. When the powerful librarian began to show a hint of languor, Bee went in for the sting. Laundry's growing frustration made him hit more and more chaotically. In desperation, he swung in a diagonal arc to slice her skull in two. Flooding the unlikely end with essence, Bee lifted her weapon slightly. But not enough to block the blow. Instead, she transferred her weight so the force of the ninjutsu hit her left pauldron. The armor cracked slightly under the catastrophic hit. Bee groaned, her sound overshadowed by the metallic clash. Despite her pain, a smile came to her face. For while Queen Bee took a hit to the shoulder, Laundry received one directly in the gut. The estoc sank deep into his stomach and came out the other side. All at once, the insidious enchantment activated. The librarian's eyes went wide. The area around the blade began to dissipate like sand falling through an hourglass. He opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The fighter dissolved into a pile of dust before being blown by the sea of the wind. A few sparks flew on the breeze before the Dreamscape announced. Unorganized laundry has been eliminated. I did it. Bee took a deep breath. She had funneled much of her essence into the sword to get the full effect. If it hadn't worked, the queen would have been in serious trouble. That was why she had saved it for just the right moment. Turning to her partner, Bee didn't have time to react to the other duo. All she could do was shield her eyes. Fireshing barely heard the announcement of Unorganized Laundry's defeat as she faced off against the Violet Beauty. The fiery awakened had measured and remeasured in her head how things should go. It wasn't easy while Fire was also fighting for her life, but there was no getting around it. Selecting the spot on the ground, she carefully maneuvered her opponent. But Isa seemed determined to avoid the point at all costs. Just now, the graceful librarian stopped a step off of the goal. Come on. Fire paused, scrunching her face. Seeing the redhead's hesitation, Izayoi_ni smirked and lunged toward her. Mid-stroke, the cutlass once again became a spear ready to skewer Fireshing. However, the aching ember was a hair faster. Using the memory's enchantment, Fire forced the tip between Isa's feet and lodged it into the crystal floor. Water seeped through the crack formed by the impact. Like the fuse of a candle, the spear lit up. Channeling her essence, the auburn-haired awakened sent the final spark flitting from her hand. Fire in the hole. The deceptively tiny flicker of heat touched the shaft. It was the last straw. Run. Fire was unsure if the blast would hurt her or not. She was immune to the flames, but any flying shrapnel from the floor could impale her. In her haste, she nearly ran into her partner. The blazing bees locked arms. Shielding their faces against the explosion, they huddled together as the sky rained down shards. Fireshing peeked to view her handiwork. A gaping hole had taken the place of the elegant Isa. Did it work? The voice of the Dreamscape confirmed what her eyes saw. Izayoi_ni has been eliminated. The librarians are defeated. The blazing bees are the champions. The crowd erupted into chants and cheers. I can't believe it. Fireshing hugged her friend. They were both in pretty bad shape from the battle, but they had somehow managed to come out on top. You were amazing. Bee's eyes swirled with excitement for her friend's performance. So were you. Fire wouldn't take all the credit. Queen Bee forced a smile behind her fraudulent facade. Thank you. What's wrong? Fireshing could sense her hesitation. What was the problem? Bee couldn't exactly put her finger on it. I am just exhausted. I am sure the adrenaline of the win will kick in soon. The crowd erupted in frenzied cheers. Chants of both the ladies' names as well as their team were overlapping and colliding. Around them, the leaking stadium was healing itself. Fire and Bee realized that they, too, were returning to their unblemished states. While the emotional fatigue remained, the physical pain evaporated like morning dew. Already Thane was standing again, ready to make a speech with a brilliant smile. Congratulations, champions. You bring glory to the Dreamscape. The performance was nothing short of marvelous. It is the duty of the awakened to each become a true warrior and stem the tide of the spell in these drastic times. I commend you on your bravery and celebrate your courage. Truly, you are the future of humanity. Today you showed how promising that future is. The saint droned on with the measured words of a well-rehearsed speech, but Bee stopped paying attention. Looking around, she spotted Isa's return. The librarians were certainly due several prizes for their performance. While they could be given at a later time, as the queen had done the year before, this ceremony was the easiest way to claim what was earned. Where's Unorganized Laundry? The man was nowhere in sight. She had hoped he moved past the incident, but it seemed like he was unwilling to return after his loss. Hopefully he is all right. Present the prizes. The Transcendent finished the speech with a flourish, bringing back Bee from her reverie. A master of the House of Night stepped forward. His purple eyes offset his winsome smile. That was quite a performance. The House of Night congratulates you on your victory. On his signal, a ramp was set out for the awakened to board the boat. Under Queen Bee's urging, Fireshing went and accepted the prizes for both of them from the esteemed master. He spoke kindly to her as transferred the memories. My daughter is a big fan of both of you, he whispered. Could I get your autograph later? Izayoi_ni then accepted the praise and awards for herself and her teammate. When it was all said and done, ocean spray filled the air like confetti in a rainbow of light and color. Bee couldn't help but smile. She was queen of the Dreamscape once more. The following morning Noble yawned as she made her way across the academy's campus. Ford had insisted on a celebratory dinner out, and thankfully none of the kids had asked exactly what they were celebrating. In order to make up for the time she had been away in the tournament, the professor had stayed up late talking to her husband instead of going to the dream realm. She could make it another day without rest, but she still felt tired. After this, I should head to the cafeteria for some strong tea. The doors of the library opened and the amount of chatter inside the normally quiet halls told her exactly where she needed to go. I have told all of you that if you aren't going to read, you need to leave. This is a library, not the Dreamscape. Ren was perched on the counter with a frustrated expression. Now, shoo. Discouraged, the patrons lingered for a moment hoping the woman would change her mind. What is going on here? Noble asked sternly. Ren may be too nice to throw you out, but I am not. I am calling security. She nudged the spectators with a small taste of fear. The threat and the foreign feeling were enough for the crowd to disperse. Ren relaxed. Thank you. Happy to help, though I am ashamed to admit I came on a similar mission as those sycophants. Noble blushed slightly. I came to congratulate you and Nickel. As long as you haven't come to ask for an autograph or a picture, your kind words are welcome. Ren opened a book on her lap and began to read. Oh, I am glad to hear that. Would you pass on my well wishes to Nick? Where is he? The professor glanced around the shelves. Here, Noble, what do you need? Out of nowhere, the man seemed to materialize. I just wanted to say I saw you in the fight, and I was impressed. Noble dipped her head slightly. Well done. You mean wounding a saint? Most people wouldn't say that was my finest moment. Nickel placed the book in his hand back on the shelf. I meant your performance in the finals. You held your own against Queen Bee. The professor could feel the conversation was getting away from her. Isn't Fireshing your friend? You should be congratulating her for her win. Nickel looked at Noble with an incredulous expression. I did, but I consider you and Ren, if not friends, then at least colleagues. The professor felt the bitterness emanating from the young man, though she wasn't sure if it was aimed at her or the situation. I read that the Blazing Bees are giving all their prize money to an orphanage in the outskirts. Ren glanced up from her book. Oh, that's nice. Noble smiled brightly. The idea had been Sarai's. After hearing about Honey's adoption, the baker wanted to do what she could to help children in need. It's too nice, Nickel shrugged. Give Fireshing my congratulations when you see her. I didn't make the awards ceremony to do it myself. I will. The professor paused. Nick. What? The librarian looked irritated. I was just wondering. Did you let Queen Bee win? People had accused her of that very stunt the year before, and it had bothered her to no end. And now she was doing that exact thing to the person she had defeated. The words had come out before she had thought the better of them. Nickel's face twitched slightly before taking on a neutral expression. The act would have worked on anyone else, but the woman across from him was an emotional lie detector. And she had made him angry. The frustrated librarian picked up a stack of books from the help desk. Noble, I have to get back to work. Unless you need something book-related, I'll head back to what I was doing. Oh, I am sorry. Biting her lip, Noble gave an apologetic smile. Of course you are busy. Forgive me for disturbing you. Congratulations to you both again. Leaving the library, the floating awakened only had one thought on her mind. He didn't say no. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. In the end, Noble decided that she was robbing herself of a well-earned victory. No one in the media had mentioned anything about unorganized laundry throwing the match. She would wear the title of champion with pride. I named myself Queen Bee. I should act like it. And she did. The next months flew by. Bee continued to train with Fireshing in the Dreamscape. Additionally, she made a triumphant return to the individual arena. Her bout with Nickel had reminded her of the importance of stamina. If Noble wasn't going to go out and practice inside the dream realm, she would need to work extra hard in the Dreamscape to make up for it. The year ended in what felt like a blink of an eye. And with it, another batch of sleepers went and returned to the waking world. A few weeks had passed since the solstice, and school was already back in session. Most of the students at the academy currently were the freshly christened awakened. Education did not stop once people were no longer sleepers. Those who wanted to continue could learn as much as they liked. This time of year, most of Noble's work involved helping new awakened identify memories that they recently earned in the dream realm. It gave her a plethora of material for papers. All in all, it was probably her favorite part of the season. Professor Noble, Someone called her name as she entered the front gate of the academy that morning. Noble smiled broadly as an old man with bushy eyebrows beckoned her over. Teacher Julius, how good to see you. Walking over, the professor hugged her mentor and dipped her head toward the shadowy figure beside him. Hello. Julius clasped his hands excitedly. You have impeccable timing as always, Professor Noble. I was wondering if you might do me a favor. I have a meeting that I am late for on the other side of the campus, and I need someone to show Master Sunless here to his classroom. Julius looked at her apologetically. I don't suppose you would be willing to escort him. Noble looked at Sunless. He seemed mildly uncomfortable but did not deny that he needed the help. The professor nodded with a bright smile. I would be honored. Master Sunless, what class are you taking? The young man coughed. I'm not going to a lecture. I am giving one. Forgive me. Noble's ears burned. I am sorry for assuming. I did not realize you had been brought on staff here. Julius chuckled softly as he patted Sunless on the shoulder. You cannot blame her too much, my boy. You do look a bit young to be running a classroom. I am sure you will do splendidly. Noble tried to recover from her mistake. It's not like this is your first time teaching someone. One corner of Sunless's mouth tilted upward. No, just the first time in a classroom. Well, you are teacher Julius's most accomplished protege. And Julius is truly the best teacher to have ever existed. I don't know about that. I did have two of the best students to have ever attended the academy though. You've both turned out better than any teacher could have hoped. Julius beamed with pride. Sunless's gaze narrowed slightly. Aren't you late for a meeting? The old man's eyes opened wide. Ah, yes, thank you. As you can see, I would much rather be here. Sunless is teaching in the lecture hall where teacher Geo used to be. Do you know how to get the key? Noble nodded. I can handle it from here. Julius wiggled his bushy eyebrows excitedly. I look forward to hearing about your rousing success, my boy. Maybe the three of us can celebrate afterward. Thankfully, the old teacher was in too much of a hurry to wait for an answer. Noble was not sure what the appropriate response would have been. If you'll come with me, I will get you that key and help you find the room, she offered to the pale young man. Sunless nodded and fell in step beside her. The cool air around them made them move across the compound at a brisk pace. So, you go by Professor Noble? The master asked tentatively. The floating awakened smiled. That is what people call me here, yes. You do not have to, of course. I suppose they will call you Master Sunless. I suppose they will. We will see, the man answered noncommittally. What course are you teaching? Noble wondered what topic would entice a master to lecture at the academy. Resource management during prolonged expeditions and intercitadel travel. Sunless shrugged. That's a mouthful. Her smile remained in place. How interesting. Are you excited? Noble felt the man's emotion spike. It intensified until he finally answered. I think so. It is normal to be nervous on your first day. Just have fun with it. Noble enjoyed classes more when she was able to relax and speak openly with her students. Fun. What kind of fun? Sunless was suddenly very attentive to what she was saying. I try to convey my love for the topic in fun and interesting ways. It keeps students engaged. The professor nodded. I see. The young man seemed less than convinced. I'll give you an example. I teach courses on memories, and I often have students show me ones that they don't know how to use. About half the time the memory ends up being dangerous and I have to intervene. Thank goodness for my chamber that can contain blasts. It has saved us all more than once. So you prank your students to get them to pay attention. That's brilliant. Sunless internalized the information. Noble winced. I prefer to think of it as an object lesson. Sunless eyed her seriously. But it works. Students listen. Most of the time, the professor answered honestly. Of course, no plan was foolproof. Julius said you would have useful advice. The master commented, reserving his own judgment. He said you were one of the best. Julius is much quicker to see my strengths than my flaws, Noble deferred. He does like to see the best in people. Sunless gave a small smile. Coming to the door, Noble pulled out the key and opened the lecture hall. Teacher Geo used to complain about the door sticking, so if the key doesn't work right away, I recommend giving the door a light shove with your shoulder. A very light shove. The janitors aren't too happy when they have to replace things because an awakened overestimated their strength. Noble reddened slightly, remembering her last run-in with the maintenance staff. How was she supposed to know that the wastebasket was so flimsy? At least nothing caught fire that time. Lost in her thoughts, she almost missed the young master's bow as he turned to head down the hall. Good to know. Thank you for your help. The professor furrowed her brow. Where are you going? To get ready for my object lesson, of course. Sunless smirked. The master's excitement only further piqued his colleague's curiosity. And what, may I ask, is this object? Only one of the most necessary objects one could possess while traveling across the dream realm, of course. Sunless's dark eyes twinkled. Water, a food supply, shelter. Noble's mind raced as she tried to think of all the possibilities. And what object is that? What else? A chair, the master answered seriously. The professor blinked at him a couple of times. I see. Good luck with the lecture. Sunless nodded. Noble could almost swear his shadow gave her a thumbs up as she turned to leave. Great. Now she was hallucinating in addition to being confused. She shook her head to clear it. I guess I should be glad that he is no longer nervous. That must really be some chair. The rest of the day passed quietly. As expected, Sunless's class was the talk of every student in the hall. He had made quite an impression, and maintenance had not needed to be called for any cleanup. All in all, it was a good day. Her happy mood lasted until she entered the light rail. Seeing an ad for Antarctic-crafted synthetic wood furniture, the professor's heart clenched. Her eyes darted away, desperate to find a seat where she could not see the banner. But it wasn't enough. Her mind still fixated on the sign. Calling forth the portcullis key, Noble stared intently at its intricate patterns. She did not dare look up at her fellow passengers. Her heart was more burdened every day for what was to come, and the general population still had no idea of their impending doom. That furniture will not be manufactured much longer. Thankfully, the government was aware and had not been idle in the time that had passed. While Noble was not given any of the details, Ford repeatedly assured her that preparations were being made to evacuate Antarctica effectively. The sooner we can get people out, the better. Based on the shortest calculations, the gates should not start opening for a while, but the spell did not have to honor their timeline. The faster the government got people clear of danger, the more people could be rescued from the horrors like Noble experienced. Based on Fort's emotional state lately, those plans were coming closer and closer to being enacted. He had been tense and often distant. The deputy director looked like he was bearing the weight of the world on his shoulders. He isn't, but the government is, Noble reminded herself. That is why when Fort came home whistling later that evening, the professor quirked an eyebrow at him. Hello, beautiful wife. How was your day? Fort hung up his coat in the closet. It was better than usual. You'll never guess who is a new lecturer at the academy. Noble tried to match her husband's chopped mood. A new lecturer, Is it someone I know? The deputy director tapped his chin. Master Sunless. Julius asked me to show him to his lecture hall. I even gave him some advice, which he seemed to have taken a little too much to heart. The woman paused as she could feel her husband's bubbling excitement. Good day at the office? She asked as he kissed her cheek. He sniffed at the pot on the stove and shot her a winsome grin. Can't I just be happy to see my wife? The woman narrowed her gaze in challenge. Are you? Always. He beamed. Noble set down the large spoon and placed her hands on her hips. Very clever. What is really going on? After retrieving his bag from the couch, Ford returned with a little white square and a huge grin. What is that? Why do you have an envelope? We don't get mail. When she was a child, the professor remembered a mail carrier would come down her street and deliver packages and letters daily. That was so long ago. Now packages could be brought by PTV drivers, by bots, or through a myriad of other means, but messages were no longer sent like that. The envelope was a flash from her past. Here, rather than explain, Ford handed it over. After wiping her hands, Noble carefully examined the white rectangle. A sword piercing an anvil was pressed into the red wax attached to the white paper. She recognized the seal immediately. She furrowed her brow even more. The insides of the letter only confused her further. Deputy Director Fort, you are cordially invited by Clan Valor to attend. Noble scanned down. This is an invitation to Valor's annual ball. How in the world did you get an invite? Fort's smile wavered. What do you mean? I am a highly sought-after socialite. Seeing her incredulous look, he chuckled. Okay. Valor requested the names of government officials to invite, and I put mine in for consideration. The deputy director puffed out his chest. But you don't like Valor. Noble hesitated to use the word hate. Fort was not fond of any of the great clans, but he liked Valor the least. If the invitation had been from Clan Song or the House of Night, she might have been less confused. I might not be fond of the legacies, but I am very fond of my wife. When was the last time we got to go to a fancy party? Fort winked. Noble's mouth opened wide. You did all this to go on a date with me. The man's eyes danced with mischief. Think about it. Our daughter is old enough to be left in charge for the evening. She has been begging to earn some extra money. Don't you want to be whisked away on the dance floor by a handsome stranger? Stranger. No. You. Absolutely. The professor dipped a curtsy. I cannot believe I will be going to a ball. The woman smiled and held the letter to her chest. Then frowned, filled with sudden terror. I have nothing to wear. You would put all others to shame while wearing a potato sack. No one will care what you are wearing. Fort took his wife's free hand and kissed it. But I am sure you can go shopping for something new. Did someone say shopping? Honey entered unbidden. Count me in. Fort nodded at the teen. I am taking your mother to a ball. I need her to look like a queen. Noble blushed. I don't know if that would be quite appropriate. Although I have always wanted to wear a tiara. She shook her head. I just need to look presentable. Honey pressed her hands to her cheeks with a girlish squeal. A ball. I've always wanted to go to a ball. You'll be babysitting. Don't worry, we will pay you the going rate. Fort cut her off before she asked if she could come along. The girl nodded. I understand. You can count on me. I promise. And don't worry, Mom. We will find the perfect gown, and I can even help you with your makeup. Noble cut her eyes at her daughter. Is there something wrong with the way I do my makeup? Honey cleared her throat. Not at all. It's just a little plain. I see. And you will make it less plain. The professor watched her daughter's face light up. Exactly. She nodded enthusiastically. How long do we have before the ball? Looking down at the page, Noble did a quick calculation. Around 6 weeks. So short a time. We need to get started right this instant. It's a good thing I am already done with my schoolwork for today. I will make you glamorous in no time. She pulled on her mother's hand and began to lead her towards the bedroom. But dinner. Noble looked back at the food on the stove. It was going to burn. Dad can handle it. This is an emergency. Honey continued to usher her mother down the hall. Fort. The woman begged her husband to intervene. The man smiled. I've got dinner under control. You two have fun. Reluctantly, Noble allowed herself to be taken under the teen's wing. Honey squealed again in delight. With all the commotion, Blaze and Brock peeked out of their room. What is going on? Blaze asked. I'm giving Mom a makeover, Honey announced proudly. Both boys perked up at the news. Can we help? Brock clapped his hands. The teen thought for a moment and then eyed them seriously. I suppose, but only if you do exactly what I say. Yes, ma'am. The boys saluted and fell in line behind their sister and mother. Oh, Mom, Honey hummed excitedly. I have the most gorgeous purple for your eyelids. You won't even recognize yourself when I am done. Noble resisted the urge to roll her eyes. How sweet. Ford looked at the time and then glanced at the door to his bedroom. Sitting on the couch, he tapped his charcoal Oxfords on the rug. He looked at the time again. He stood, smoothed his lapels, and began to pace. My dear, Fort called as kindly as he could. I can feel your anxiety from here, my love. I promise we will not be late. Noble answered from the bedroom. You cannot rush beauty, Dad. Honey chided, her voice muffled slightly by the closed door. Just a minute more, the professor promised. We barely have a minute, Ford muttered as he tugged at his gray vest. He pulled out his communicator and checked on the status of their ride. He knew that Noble wasn't thrilled about actually traveling to the ball. But the sooner they were in the vehicle, the sooner they could arrive. If only she would hurry up and come out. Fort peeked out the front window and saw headlights outside. Noble, RPTVO, he turned around and his jaw dropped. There were no words for the sight he saw. Somehow he hadn't heard the two ladies exit the bedroom. Honey grinned like a fool, unable to hide her pleasure at her father's stunned expression. In front of her was the most captivating creature Fort had ever seen. Clad in a deep blue gown, Noble looked at her husband from beneath her long eyelashes. A coy smile graced her ruby lips, but he could see the hesitation in her eyes. Well, how do I look? She asked at last, unable to wait any longer. Don't you think the earrings I borrowed from Sarai look nice with the gown? You cannot go in that, Fort said at length. Noble bit her lip. What's wrong? Is it too form-fitting? I debated if it was too much. Perhaps I should. It's perfect. You are perfect, the man said, closing the gap between them. Which is why I cannot let others see you. No one will be able to take their eyes off of you. So, does that mean you like it? Noble felt a blush come to her cheeks at her husband's sudden nearness. Enough to keep you here instead of taking you out, he answered with a Cheshire grin. On that is where I make my exit. Honey looked slightly disgusted. Thank you for all your work on my makeup and hair. Noble smiled at her daughter. I know I was skeptical, but I really like the results. Happy to help, and Dad is right, you look amazing. The teen dipped her version of a curtsy and scurried off. She had brothers to watch and babysitting money to make. Now that I have you alone, Fort's voice became husky. None of that. Noble blushed even deeper. You'll mess up my hair and makeup. Good. You are too divine. A flaw or two will remind me you are human. Fort pressed his lips to his wife's before she could object. Wrapping his arms around her waist, they spent a moment in each other's arms. Noble pulled away at last. You were about to say that our ride was here, weren't you? Oh, Fort had completely forgotten about the lights outside. He weighed his options and sighed. I suppose we should not keep them waiting any longer. Nodding slowly, Noble pulled herself from her husband's arms and adjusted her hair. Somehow the ornate braid encircling her head had become slightly unpinned. She glared at her husband while replacing the coronet. Her husband winked unapologetically. Opening the door, Fort frowned. They were here a moment ago. He stared out at the empty street. Are you sure you weren't just trying to hurry me along? Noble peeked around her husband. I am sure. Maybe it was for one of the neighbors. Fort scratched his head. Ah, here it is. I guess they just decided to go around the block while waiting. Are you ready? The handsome gentleman held out his hand. Noble placed her fingers in his palm. Good night, kids. We love you, she called. Brock and Blaze came tumbling into the living room with Honey hot on their heels. She had likely been trying to stop them from disturbing her parents as they left. Wow, Mom, Brock gave 2 thumbs up. You look like a princess. Blaze's mouth hung open, looking like a miniature version of his father when he did. Fort nodded. You all be good. Don't wait up. After hugs and kisses, Fort finally managed to shut the door. He took the lady's hand once more and bowed over it. Your carriage awaits, my queen. Fort. Noble got a good look at the PTV for the first time. If it could even be called that. The thing stretched out longer than any vehicle had the right to and looked to be the epitome of style and grace. After you. Fort opened the door of the PTV. Thank you, good sir. The professor dipped her head. Thank you for being a good sport, he added quietly as she climbed inside. He knew how much she avoided riding in anything that wasn't on a track. However, the estate holding the ball was not situated particularly close to any of the train stops, and even if one were, the government did not want to look like paupers in front of the great clans. Fort saw no way around refusing the luxury transport. It is fine. I doubt the driver plans on taking any sudden turns with such esteemed guests inside, Noble smiled. Within the vehicle, she was welcomed by 4 other government officials and their dates. She greeted them quickly while taking her seat. Sorry to keep you waiting. Fort pulled the door closed. Waiting? We just arrived, an older gentleman with slightly graying hair responded. Master Kens looked at the deputy director with confusion. The PTV pulled out into the street and began its journey. Fortunately for Noble, the ride was smooth, and the group seemed content to stay on pleasant topics. I wonder who all will be there tonight, a petite lady was saying. A large green plume stuck out of her low bun complementing her emerald cocktail dress. I bet everyone who is anyone will be there. Can you imagine? The others began to gossip about who might and might not have been invited. Noble leaned over to her husband. Will the Chancellor be there? She asked softly. Noble knew Gui had been invited. It would have been foolish for the great clan Valor to invite her husband and neglect one of the most powerful men in the NQSC. For the sake of harmony between the clans, he has elected not to attend, Fort answered as neutrally as he could. Noble hid her grin. That is code for he didn't want to be around people, and that was as good of an excuse as any. The Chancellor was a lot of things, but he had no taste for rubbing elbows with socialites or worse, dancing with them. Noble had no such fear, especially with the handsome gentleman beside her as her chosen dance partner. As the PTV turned off the public road and onto the private thoroughfare of the grand estate, the professor was sure of one thing. It was going to be an evening to remember. The PTV slowed to a stop. Noble was very relieved. The last turn into the manor's driveway had caused her to bump her hand against the seat to prevent more serious contact. Her fingers stung until Fort, noticing the problem, picked them up and kissed the tips. While that did not change anything physically, the warmth soothed her aching soul. Their vehicle joined a long line of cars biding their time until it was their turn at the red carpet. The pause gave Noble time to take in the scene. It was even more grand than she had expected. It looks like a palace. The closest Noble could come to describing it was comparing it to the embassy she had visited before they left North America, but even that did not do Clan Valor justice. The large estate had many buildings, sprawling out over a massive area. To think this is just one of the family homes. The professor had spent time around very wealthy people on many occasions throughout her life. This place was as impressive as any she had ever seen. It was truly a city within the city. At last, they reached the front of the line. A valet gallantly opened the PTV's door. "My lady," the valet held out his hand. "Thank you." Noble accepted his assistance though she did not need it. The antiquated practice gave the whole party a dignified air. Just like a fairy tale. Noble smiled warmly at her husband as he offered his arm. Tucking her hand neatly into the crook of his elbow, the pair waited for the rest of the group before striding confidently forward. The honor guard lining the red velvet carpet enhanced the feeling of fantasy, but it also reminded Noble to be cautious. She was here as a representative of the government and would need to behave as such. Drawing attention to herself, whether for positive or negative reasons, was ill-advised. While she was sure to have a delightful time with her husband, Noble's aim for interactions with the other guests at the party was to remain polite and forgettable. Which shouldn't be hard considering who all is here. Aside from her husband, Noble could count the number of mundane human guests on one hand. 2 of them were government diplomats with her. All of the others preparing to enter the party were awakened or masters. Inside, Noble had no doubt that there would even be saints among the guests. Who would give a second thought to a nobody like her? Only the man walking next to her. And that was the way she preferred it. In all their stately dignity, the government officials passed under one of the vermilion banners containing an anvil pierced by a sword. It was time to be announced. Master Director Kens, Miss Alice, Deputy Director Fort, awakened Noble, awakened Ty, awakened Shelby. Noble looked around the room as the rest of her contingency was introduced. The party was already full of people. Powerful people. Descending the stairs into the ballroom, Noble held up the hem of her gown to get a better look at each step. She was relieved when she reached the wide dance floor. "Look over there." Fort drew his wife's attention to a crowd of people. They were less than subtly hovering like bees awaiting their turn with a flower. At first Noble thought the guests were trying to catch the attention of their most gracious host, but when the mass of humanity parted, she could see their real aim. 5 people were at the center of all the commotion. Among them, an enigmatic woman with silver hair, a blonde with blue, sightless eyes, and a statuesque beauty were all politely interacting with those around them. The ladies were accompanied by 2 men that Noble recognized. Ascended Sunless and Ascended Kai. She turned a curious glance at her husband. Ford nodded slowly. The ladies are Lady Changing Star of the Immortal Flame, Ascended Song of the Fallen, and Ascended Raised by Wolves. The professor remembered that she should call the former singer by his true name in this setting. I did not realize they were friends of Clan Valor. 5 of the youngest and most promising masters of our time. Everyone wants to be their friend right now. Fort chuckled softly. Shall we try and say hello? And join all those sycophants? I don't know about you, but I did not come here to gawk. Noble clicked her tongue. Oh, and why did you come? The corners of the man's mouth tipped upwards. Before Noble could answer, a hush fell over the crowd. The couple turned their gaze to find a dignified man with steely blue eyes wearing a suit of pristine black fabric. The gray at his temples spoke of wisdom, but his presence was suffocating. Noble caught her breath. It felt like the air was being forced out of the room. Fort groaned slightly and put his hand to his chest. If her awakened body was feeling it, how much worse must it be for him? Noble's mind raced to find a way to alleviate her husband's distress. Thankfully, the Transcendent smiled, dispelling the pressure that threatened to squash them. This was none other than Saint Matic of Valor, the famous Whispering Blade. The nominal leader of Clan Valor cleared his throat gently. Ladies and gentlemen, as the daughter of a former director, Noble knew a good speech when she heard it. Whispering Blade started by reminding all of them of those who had died. The moment of silence was powerful. Even Noble, who had no attachment to almost anyone in the room, felt the weight of the loss. Then Saint Matic launched into rousing oration on the bright future of humanity. The contrast was brilliant, lifting those in the room with each powerful word. Then he let the room in on a secret. His wife had written his speech. Saint Matic and I have something in common, it seems, Ford whispered into Noble's ear. The woman furrowed her brow. What do you mean? We both have ladies in our life that make us look good, Fort answered, allowing his hand to brush up against hers. He really is laying on the charm thick. Noble didn't mind. He was her Prince Charming. And even after all these years, his touch still made her heart beat faster. Whispering Blade ended his speech by taking a refined woman by the hand and leading her to the center of the floor. When the music began, Matic whisked his wife around in an elegant circle. The melody was pleasant and inviting. Soon other couples joined the first on the dance floor. Before she could say how lovely everything looked, the hand that was brushing up against hers was pulled away. Noble looked, only to find it was palm up, inviting her to take it. "May I have the honor of this dance?" Fort asked with a winsome smile. With a blush, Noble accepted the handsome man's hand. "Nothing would make me happier." Fort wrapped his arm around his wife as they began to move in time with the tune. The world around them faded as the couple was caught up in the magic of the moment. Everything was perfect, if only for a moment. Noble looked deep into her husband's eyes as he spun her out and then back to himself. "I don't remember you being such a graceful dancer," she said when he seamlessly moved into the next step. "I am full of surprises." Fort winked. "I have been practicing so I don't make a fool of myself." "I am glad to see it meets your approval." The deputy director dipped his partner slightly as the music ended. "We should go dancing more often." Noble felt suddenly out of breath by his nearness. How could the man have such a hold on her even after all these years? "Yes, we should. I love holding you close." Fort opened his mouth to say something else equally romantic when his attention was pulled away by a disturbance behind his enchanting dance partner. Noble turned around and frowned. Two of the men who had come with them, Master Ken's and Awakened Tai, were in a heated discussion. "Do you need to?" "Yes, I should go intervene." "I'm sorry," Fort answered before Noble had finished her question. The pair snaked their way across the room to where the two men were arguing. "We need to do it now. He has refused to meet with us at any other time," Awakened Tai was trying to make his case. His brown eyes were filled with emotion. Director Kens looked across the room and shook his head. "Now is not the time or place for that. We are here to foster goodwill, not to cause problems." "What seems to be the issue?" Fort hoped the director would not fault him for joining. "Awakened Tai would like to approach Whispering Blade about our little problem in the south," Kens whispered cryptically, sending Noble a wary glance from beneath his dense eyebrows. "My wife is aware of what is to come," Fort pressed his lips together. "She was on the team that helped discover the location. They are talking about Antarctica." Noble had guessed that was the topic from the older man's mention of the South, and Fort confirmed it. "Why do you want to talk to the Saint about that?" The professor did not realize Clan Valor had been informed of the coming doom. "We have requested assistance from the great clans for the campaign. Valor has not been receptive to talks." Fort explained quickly. He turned to the two men. "But I agree with Director Kens that now is not the time. We are guests here. Neither of you are my superior," Awakened Tai reminded them. "I don't need your permission to approach Whispering Blade or any of the other clan members." "Perhaps we should find a less public place to discuss this," Fort suggested. "We are drawing unwanted attention." Tai licked his lips. "Fine." The deputy director turned to Noble with an apologetic look. He did not like how the other men were ruining his wife's magical evening. Noble understood. "It is fine. Come back when you can. I will find other ways to entertain myself until then." Part of her wanted to join them, but too many of the government guests suddenly disappearing together was likely to raise some eyebrows. "I will be right back and we will pick up right where we left off," Fort promised with a determined nod. After squeezing his hand, Noble released him to his work. The men moved off in the direction of the facilities. Turning back to the room, the professor found the other ladies from her group. A beautiful petite lady in an emerald dress was speaking with a delighted grin. The two women with her also seemed engrossed in the conversation. "All I am saying is that I am glad Lady Changing Star seems to be able to love again. After that fateful time with Castor, we were not sure it was possible," the young woman was saying as Noble drew near. The awakened lady in a lavender dress next to her clicked her tongue. "Come on, Alice, it is your opinion." "Well, it should be everyone's. Look at the way she is looking at Master Sunless. Don't you think they would be perfect together?" Alice hazarded a glance toward the two parties in question. "Don't tell me you are going to try to matchmake." The third woman rolled her eyes. Her pink ballgown was peppered with tiny gems. Alice's smile widened. "Why not? If I play my cards right, maybe I can end up as a bridesmaid in their wedding someday." "You have lost your mind," The woman in pink blew out her cheeks. What do you think, awakened noble? Should Lady Neffes try her luck with love again? The other awakened in the group invited. I wish her the best, the professor answered noncommittally. While she did like fictional drama, she was uncomfortable making definitive statements about Lady Neffes without knowing her better. That settles it. I am very thirsty and I'm going to get some punch. Alice touched her throat gently. I am sure it has nothing to do with the fact that the refreshment table will bring you right past a happy couple. The woman in purple teased. Her pink companion clicked her tongue. Or the fact that Ascended raised by wolves just headed that way as well. All eyes glanced toward the long banquet table where the statuesque master had already cleaned 3 plates and was beginning a 4th. The woman showed no signs of stopping any time soon. I couldn't eat that much even when I was pregnant with twins. Noble marveled. Unaware of the observation, Alice patted her bun. I have no idea what you two mean. I said I was thirsty, and I am. If other things happen, so be it. You ladies are welcome to join me if you like. While the other two agreed, Noble was the one dissenting vote. I am not in the mood for food or drink just now. Please enjoy the refreshments, and I will catch up with you later. Noble decided to embrace the moment alone. Well, alone was perhaps the wrong word. There were people all around her dancing, talking, and flirting. Any number of relationships were being formed and a few were likely being ended. This was the place to make valuable connections, but one misstep could make an enemy out of a friend. That was the way it was with the great clans, Valor especially. I don't like politics. Noble grimaced slightly. Or rather, I don't like petty politics. People needed to be guided and the world needed to be run, but she could do without the underhanded tactics that were often used. What am I doing? I am here to enjoy myself. Noble banished the ugly thoughts and put on a pleasant smile. The room was so crowded, and the professor had to consciously ignore all of the emotional stimuli going on around her. That is why she did not sense the stunning woman in a red wine dress until she bumped into her. Excuse me. Unable to look away, the professor moved to accommodate the awakened with flawless silvery skin. She reminds me of Sharky. Noble had only ever met one other gray-skinned human. That Dreamscape duelist had razor-sharp teeth like the animal of his namesake. The fault lays with me. She dipped her head politely and smiled. Noble was relieved to find the pearly ivory in her mouth was straight and pristine. But then a strange chill came over her. Noble couldn't put her finger on it, but she had a strong desire to get as far away from the stunning lady as she could. That woman is dangerous. Don't worry, she won't bite. The daughter of song is on her best behavior. The words startled Noble. Had the person been reading her thoughts? One thing was clear. Someone had been watching her. Noble had no idea how long the awakened party guest had been standing there studying her with curious brown eyes. The woman wore a sleek black dress accompanied by a stole around her neck, making her resemble a slender wolf. Forgive me, my sister was asked to dance, and I just happened to glance your way. If I have spoken out of turn, I'm awakened Noble. The professor dipped her head, cutting off the rest of the apology. The other woman was relieved. I am awakened Moon. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. Although Noble was a bit suspicious of the sudden encounter, she did not sense any deception in the partygoer. The woman did not seem to have an ulterior motive, but it was still wise to be cautious. What do you think of all this? Moon asked, trying to find a topic that would suit them. I do not get to go to functions like this often, so this is a very rare treat. The professor smiled, remembering how lucky she was to be at such a fancy affair. I am not one for big parties either, but my sister insisted I should come with her. Moon motioned to a lovely young woman spinning on the dance floor with a master. Based on the emotions of both parties, the two were having a very splendid time. I'm glad you were willing to accompany her, Noble responded after watching the dancers mix into the crowd. They fell into a companionable silence. Noble spotted Ascended Nightingale and Ascended Song of the Fallen taking a turn together among the dancers. As Ascended, their beauty was so overwhelming that it felt a little like looking at two blazing stars. The professor wondered idly what Alice would think about such a romantic pairing. They go well together, don't they? Moon startled her from her reverie. Oh, I suppose. Noble shifted uncomfortably. Excuse me, awakened Moon, but can you read minds? Moon laughed. No, it was just easy to guess where you were looking. Those two are eye-catching. Seeing Noble's incredulous gaze she added, I promise my aspect has nothing to do with the mind or knowing others' thoughts. Don't believe me, I'll prove it. Silently, the woman's face morphed to resemble a predatory canine. The stole around her neck was absorbed to be the scruff of her wolfish coat. Thankfully the rest of her remained human, at least for now. A shapeshifter. Impressive. Noble knew of very few who could do such a thing without becoming a saint. Thank you. The woman's smile returned to a human one. The two continued to watch the couple's dance, and Noble always came back to the mesmerizing steps of Ascended's Kai and Cassia. How a blind girl could move so effortlessly throughout the ballroom was impressive. When they passed by, Noble could hear the conversation between them. I hope you don't mind me using your vision. The beautiful young lady looked a little embarrassed. It is perfectly all right with me as long as you don't mind the view, the charming gentleman smiled warmly. Gracefully, the pair spun out of view, and with them went Cassia's witty retort. Have you spoken to them yet? Moon asked. Them. The professor raised her eyebrows slightly. You mean Song of the Fallen and Nightingale? The sleek awakened chuckled softly. I mean any of the 5 masters that are making such a stir tonight. Do you know any of them? I went to a Nightingale concert once. Noble tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes opened slightly when she realized what she had just said. With my daughter of course, the professor amended. She is a big fan. My little gremlin is as well. It is amazing the things we do for our children, the shapeshifter sighed, coming back to her original topic. Does that mean you do not know Master Sunless? Noble blinked at her companion. Was this some kind of test? Why do you ask? He just looked this way a couple of times. I don't think it was at me, so it made me curious. Moon shrugged. Glancing over at the master, Noble met Sunless's gaze. He nodded at her in recognition but made no move to come over and speak. Instead, he turned and headed out in search of the restroom. We have met, Noble admitted, deciding exactly what to say. He teaches classes occasionally at the academy. He was probably looking at me to try to place me. I don't usually look like this. The professor had chosen her words very carefully. Friendly or not, this woman was still a stranger. Admitting that she was familiar with the man professionally would count neither for nor against her. It was the safest option. Her words had quite an effect. Oh, Moon's eyes shined with excitement. That's amazing. On his first day, I helped him find the keys to his room, Noble added when she saw the comment was well received. What is he like as a teacher? Moon leaned in, intrigued. Noble contemplated for a moment. He is quite brilliant, but mostly what I hear students talk about is his very exceptional chair. Wait, you are Professor Noble? Moon's question threw her for a loop again. That is what people call me, yes. A friend of mine, L, constantly tells this story of her and a memory called the Forbidden Fruit. She gives you full credit for keeping her alive. Noble recalled the woman whose looks could launch 1,000 ships. I am glad to know my lesson stuck with her. Please give her my best wishes when you see her. In fact, at that moment Noble felt a tap on her shoulder. Forgive me, madam, but I spied you across the room, and you look like you could use a dance partner. Would you be so kind as to give me the honor? Please do not say no. It will break my heart. Noble took the man's hand. Awakened Moon, this is Deputy Director Fort, also known as my husband. The professor blushed slightly at the man's adoring gaze. A pleasure. Moon dipped a small curtsy. For me as well. Fort inclined his head in a small bow. Now, I apologize, but I must take this beauty on a trip around the floor this very instant. That is if she agrees. Nodding at her husband, Noble bid her companion farewell. It was very nice to meet you, Moon. Moon. A lilting voice beckoned. I have just the person I want you to meet. Moon waved to her sister that she was coming. Until next time. Leading his Noble to the shining floor, Fort took hold of his wife. Now where were we? As they began to glide across the floor, Noble noticed that her husband seemed more at ease than when she left him. I guess the conversation went well, she asked carefully. While she had no desire to ruin their special moment, she also did not want to continue to wonder how things had gone. Tai means well, he really does. He is just passionate about getting the clans to help us with the evacuation. Director Kenz will keep an eye on him. He told me to go and enjoy myself. Fort winked. I like the director already, Noble chuckled softly. Kenz was not Fort's superior. He worked in a different directorate of the government, but she was glad that her husband had taken the order seriously. The rest of the song passed like a sublime vision. Noble could not get over how fortunate she was. The man of her dreams had put on a suit and practiced dancing all to give her this one moment in time. Her heart was full. The song ended and the couple clapped politely. The musicians accepted the praise before launching into another classical piece. "Shall we go again?" Fort asked, not waiting for an answer. He pulled the brunette beauty in a closed hold and started to move through the intricate steps. Noble was about to comment about her husband's skills when a chipper voice reached her ears. "I told you so." Passing by with her dance partner, Alice squeaked the news into Noble's ear. She moved on with an ecstatic smile, leaving Fort both confused and amused. "What was that?" he whispered to his wife. "Alice said she told me so. The last thing I heard her say was about matchmaking Lady changing star to Ascended Sunless," Noble offered. "Well, it seems there may be some merit to her claim." Fort spun his wife in a half-circle so that she could look behind where she was a moment before. "I see." The professor watched a silver-haired beauty be led around the floor by her dark-haired companion. The two were completely engrossed in one another. Sunless and Neffys were quite the stunning pair. Their fluidity of movement reminded Noble of the sun and moon. Both had their perfect place as they orbited around the cosmos of the dance floor. "Were we like that once?" Fort pulled her attention back to himself. "Young," Noble teased. "You know that isn't what I meant." The man eyed her seriously. The professor closed her eyes for a moment and felt the emotions coming off of the two masters. She pursed her lips. Beneath their serene expressions, Neffys and Sunless were anything but calm. Lady Changing Star was particularly good at hiding the turmoil bubbling inside her. "What is it?" Fort tilted his head to one side. "Probably nothing." Noble shook her head. "Anyway, I don't like comparison. We are us and they are them. I would much rather focus on us." She kissed the man, much to his surprise. "You aren't okay with me kissing you in our own front yard, but here is just fine." His mouth hung open slightly. "Are you complaining?" Noble challenged him. "Not in the slightest." He pressed his lips to the woman's quickly. It seems the love birds are leaving. Should we sneak away as well?" Noble looked in the direction of the two masters who were hurriedly leaving the main hall. While others whispered about a tryst between them, Noble could sense the truth. Their exit was anything but romantic. "Let's just dance." Noble pulled Fort close. "The evening will be over all too soon, and my coach will turn back into a pumpkin." Taking the cue, Fort shut out the rest of the world in favor of the only person in the room he cared about. The two spent the next hour dancing in each other's arms before taking a break for refreshments. After finishing something red and sweet, Fort shot his wife an apologetic glance. "I know that look. My Prince Charming is about to leave his glass slipper behind." Noble smiled softly. "I don't think that is how the story goes, but I do need to make my rounds and charm all the important people in the room. I have to make the government look good." Fort graced her with his most charming grin. The professor knew that this was a requirement for his job. Fort had been sent to be seen and socialize. It was time to get to work. "Would you like to join me?" The man offered his elbow. "I know it is not your favorite thing, but at least we would be together." As a child and teen, Noble had been taken to all sorts of political functions where she was expected to play nice and be polite at all times. She had seen her mother and father be insulted to their face all while being forced to keep her cordial smile. It had always felt wrong, but the stability of relations was more important than personal feelings in such situations. This was one of those times. "I would do anything for you, my love." Noble hooked her hand in the crook of his arm. "Let's go make some new best friends." Fortunately, most of the interactions were pleasant and brief. Fort was very good at making contact, saying something witty or memorable, and then concluding the conversation on a positive note. The deputy director claimed he had taken classes to master the skill of diplomacy, but there was no masking his natural talent. Noble only needed to take the lead a couple of times, and that was only due to her prior connection to the group. One occasion was when they encountered Awakened Moon among a group of socialites. The other, unsurprisingly, was when a former student recognized her. "Professor Noble helped me discover a secondary enchantment on a memory. Saved my skin when I was attacked by a vicious horde of corrupted flies. I wonder if you might look at something else I picked up since then." Awakened Bruno raised his eyebrows expectantly. "I would be happy to help." It gave Noble great pleasure to know she had made a difference in someone's life. That was the reason she became an instructor in the first place. And she wouldn't stop helping just because a student had awakened. "Bring it by my room sometime, and I will have it analyzed." "Thanks, Professor." Because most legacies went through their training outside of the academy, the professor was not surprised to see almost none of her former students at the party. This young man was a rare treat. On the other hand, Noble saw more than one duelist that she had faced in battle. It was fascinating to see them outside the ring in a more normal setting. That is, if a ball thrown by clan valor could remotely be considered normal. While a few had the same personalities as they did in the Dreamscape, some were the polar opposite of their duelist persona. Out of all of them, only one seemed to recognize her. "You seem very familiar," the duelist eyed her critically. "Have we met? If we have, I hope it was a pleasant meeting." Noble smiled brightly. "Not too pleasant." Fort feigned jealousy as he placed his hand protectively around his wife's waist. The dramatic move brought a ripple of chuckles from the other guests in the circle. "I will think of it." Eventually, the awakened deflected, happy to allow a change of topic. And so the evening went. Noble lost count of how many people she had met, but it was at least in the hundreds, possibly more. Her mind was awash with faces and her soul was imprinted with other people's emotions. Just when Noble thought they might actually be reaching the end of their circuit, she heard someone call their names. Deputy Director Fort, awakened Noble. Director Ken's motioned for them to draw near. The government master was talking with someone obstructed by a pillar. Although Ken's wasn't a direct superior of Fort, it was better to come when called than to ignore him. Fort took his wife's hand. "Last one, I promise." Noble laughed softly. "Am I that easy to read?" The man shook his head. "No, you look like you could do this all year. But I am done, and you need at least a dozen more dances." Fort led his wife through the crowd and right to Ken's. It was only when they got around the pillar that he was able to see who the director was talking to. His muscles stiffened. "Good evening, Director Ken's." Fort bowed slightly. Normally the two would shake hands, but the formality of the event required something more. "Thank you for joining us. This is Deputy Director Fort and his wife, awakened Noble." Ken's motioned to the pair with an outstretched arm. Upon their introduction, Fort's bow deepened and Noble dipped a cordial courtesy. The Deputy Director smiled. "Pleased to meet you, Saint Matic of Valor. Thank you for welcoming us into your estate." "The pleasure is all mine," the stately gentleman answered. "You are just who I wanted to see." Noble felt the force of Whispering Blade's intense gaze. He had been wanting to see them. "Noble is the professor at the Awakened Academy that I was telling you about. She should be able to answer your questions." Ken stepped back slightly to let the brunette take center stage. "My wife wants to know about how things are run there." Matic smiled at the elegant woman beside him. "I think she means to compare it to some of our methods of training, but do not let that intimidate you." "Oh, so that is what this is about." Of all the things the saint could have wanted with them, this was by far the least problematic. Since legacy students could enroll in the academy just like any other sleeper, there was nothing for her to hide when it came to how she operated her class. "There is no comparison between our establishment and the great clan of Valor. But I will endeavor to help with your curiosity." Noble's words were met with a gracious smile from the hostess. "That is most kind." The three gentlemen listened politely as the ladies conversed. It turned out the party's hostess was very knowledgeable about the academy. Aside from her polite questions about what Noble taught, most of the information she desired was about the logistics of how things were run. "And so students can go to any class at any point?" "You mean they have no schedule to keep, and can do as they wish?" The Lady of Valor summed up the information she was given with a frown. "Teens are usually not the most efficient with their time. We try to encourage the students to make the best choices. Most want to absorb as much information as they can. Giving them some control helps foster learning. A warm body who is not listening is not doing the teacher or the sleeper any good." Noble explained. Attending the academy was not compulsory. Staying there wasn't either. In the professor's opinion, it was better to have a willing learner. Experience had taught her that emotions contributed heavily to memory retention. A bad attitude yielded bad results. "I do wonder if disciplinary actions would encourage students to be more attentive," the woman offered. Her tone indicated she wanted to be helpful even though the suggestion was not. The spell puts enough pressure on young minds without the teachers of the academy adding to that stress. Our job is to prepare them, not punish them. Noble tried not to lecture the lady, but the idea of penalizing students for trying to cope with the situation they were in seemed particularly cruel. "This conversation has been most enlightening, thank you." The older woman nodded slowly. Noble could sense that the saint's wife felt superior to the professor. But the lady had managed to keep any condescension out of her voice. The floating party guest decided not to hold the attitude against her hostess. Her family was one of the most respected in the world. If anyone was allowed to feel superior, it was them. "Thank you for inquiring after the academy. Your concern is very touching. Condescending or not, the lady does seem to care, Noble reasoned. If you have no other questions, my dear, we will let our guests get back to the party. Whispering Blade waited for his wife to agree. It is always a pleasure to spend time with our government allies, and I am sad to see that time come to an end. Director Kens, Deputy Director Fort, and Professor Noble, Matic made sure to say all of their names. If you will excuse, the Ryuari, a slurred voice cut off the saint's farewell. Tai, get back here, a second awakened government official called after her peer. Director Kens gave the woman a stern expression. She was supposed to be keeping the discordant agent out of trouble. The tall lady mouthed an apology as Tai burst into the circle. Unable to prevent the meeting, Kens cleared his throat and smiled tolerantly. Awakened Shelby and awakened Tai, this is our host. I know who he is. It's Whispering Bald. I need to speak with him. Tai wrenched himself from Shelby's grasp. Why won't you meet with the government? Are you too good for us? His slurs were loud and belligerent. Whatever Ford and Kens had tried to do earlier to quell the young man had the opposite effect. Rather than biding his time, Tai had made good use of the specially designed alcohol that Valor had been serving on trays. The man was drunk as a skunk. I am afraid I do not follow. We are always happy to assist our government allies. Maddox's tone was polite, but Noble could feel the strain beneath it. He did not like that Tai was making a scene. Forgive my associate, he is not well. Kens was pushed by the drunk official. I am fit as I've ever been. You want to keep me quiet when there is a crisis on our hands. Tai stifled a hiccup. Excuse us, my dear. Whispering Blade turned to his wife and kissed her on the cheek. Then he motioned to the government contingency. If all of you will follow me. Noble and Ford looked at one another nervously. Were they about to be kicked out of the party? Whatever was about to happen, they didn't have much choice in the matter. Along the walls, guards were poised to enforce the Saints' will at a moment's notice. Director Kens did not want to make the situation worse by refusing. Please lead the way. Matic led them away from the main hall and down a private corridor. As soon as they were out of the sight of the other guests, guards of Valor flanked them on both sides without a word. Noble forced down the uneasy feeling forming in the pit of her stomach. If the Saint had wanted them to disappear quietly, he wouldn't have made a big show of leaving with them. After regaining her composure, she tried to give Tai some calm, but he was either too drunk or too foolish to let it affect his mood. Noble did not feel comfortable pressing any harder for fear that either the man or Matic would notice and say something. She did not want that kind of attention just now. As they came to a door, Matic paused. I think it is best if awakened Tai goes home for the evening. As you said, he is not well. Noble realized that the door must be a side exit or at least lead to one. I will make sure he gets home, Shelby promised, taking the man firmly by the arm. You just want me to go because you are afraid of the truth. You want to be humanity's hero, but you are selfish cowards hiding out while we do the real work or keeping people safe. Tai spat the words violently. That is quite enough. I will be speaking with your superior tomorrow morning. This is not the end of this. Director Kens entrusted the foolish man to Shelby's care. Amid Tai's protests, the pair slipped out the door with 4 guards. Kens rubbed his forehead. Who had let Tai represent the government? What a mess. I beg your pardon, Transcendent Matic. Tai's outburst is his own opinion, and it will be dealt with decisively. The government holds Clan Valor in the highest regard. Matic did not answer. He continued to glide down the hall. After a moment of hesitation, the others decided to follow. He came to a second door and stopped. This door did not lead outside. A servant opened the large door and admitted the group's 4 remaining members. The room was large, much larger than Noble had expected. It was full of ornate furniture all emblazoned with the emblem of Valor. Matic sat behind a desk expensive enough to feed half of the outskirts and folded his hands. After offering his guests chairs across from him, the Saint tapped his fingers lightly. Care to explain what that was about? He asked calmly. Although the question was worded as a request, the Transcendent clearly demanded an answer. Master Kens coughed lightly. I believe awakened Tai was concerned that you have not yet met with the government to discuss the coming crisis. Matic rubbed his temples. You'll have to be more specific. Antarctica. The director paused. Matic's expression softened slightly. That. I had wanted to defer this until after the ball, but you are here now. Let's get this over with, shall we? We are happy to support the government in any way. That is most excellent of you. The master's exuberance was met with a sharp look. I was not finished. We are happy to support the government in any way from the NQSC. The saint spread his hands as if it were the most generous offer. But, we need awakened on the ground to hold off the gates and protect the people. That cannot happen from the NQSC. Kens tried. Whose job is it to maintain order and safety in the waking world? Surely that duty falls on the government and not clan valor. Matic challenged. The government and the great clans had a partnership, but the two were not on equal footing. Trying to force valor to do anything would not go well. The House of Night has committed extensive resources to evacuate the populace, and Clan Song has pledged to send a contingency of awakened including a saint. Kens hoped the information might encourage Matic to act in kind. Then it sounds like you have things well in hand and do not need our assistance at all. This is excellent news as our conquests in the Dream Realm are taking up a considerable amount of time. The saint smiled, but Noble could feel the false emotion behind it. I do not think you understand the severity of what we are up against. Master Kens immediately regretted his words when he felt pressure against his chest from the saint's overwhelming aura. Matic's expression darkened. I understand better than most what we are up against, as you say. You will not send me into a panic by the news of a few opening gates. We will help in the NQSC in the Dream Realm. That is what we will offer for now. As always, Clan Valor values the government and our partnership very highly. Now, shall we think about the people? Noble spoke calmly, but her words were filled with passion. Matic raised one eyebrow at her. People. The people of Antarctica deserve our best effort. I was there when North America fell. I watched the destruction. I saw the lives snuffed out in a moment. I heard the screams cut short by death. The professor blinked and images flashed across her memory. I am sorry for your loss, the saint gave trite condolences. Noble let out a short breath. Loss. That word, it does not begin to explain what one experiences when family is ripped from you. I lost my home when North America fell, but that was replaceable. My family, my aunts, uncles, and cousins that I watched die, they cannot be replaced. Please, think about the people. Matic furrowed his brow. His steely blue eyes bore into the professor's soul. I am thinking about people. My people. Clan Valor is not prepared to mobilize an army of awakened to another continent at a moment's notice. Maybe not an entire army, but surely you can spare someone. Noble held out her hands with open palms. Antarctica needs you, she begged. And which of my people do you propose I punish? Whispering Blade's angry words stopped short. His expression changed. Forgive me. That was a poor choice of words. Defending humanity is the duty of us all. It is. Master Kens was happy they could find something to agree on. Night and Song did well to offer help. We will follow suit. Matic nodded slowly. A hint of a smile crept onto his face. I will tell the White Feather clan to be ready to leave for Antarctica in the morning. Saint Tyrus will be most grateful for such an important assignment. I will send word now. If you will excuse me. After a few more gracious platitudes from both parties, Master Kens, Awakened Noble, and Deputy Director Fort were ushered out to rejoin the party. They walked in stunned silence from the room. Were we authorized to have that meeting, sir? Fort asked the director. Whether or not we were, we just did, Kens answered. He ran his hand through his long hair as he replayed all the words spoken. Something didn't sit right with me about that. Noble looked at the two men. The master nodded slightly. When they entered the throng of people, he spoke softly to the other two. Likely Valor was always planning to concede something to the government to foster goodwill, but the choice of the White Feather clan seemed rather spontaneous. Matic called it a punishment. I wonder what Saint Tyrus did to upset Whispering Blade. Noble kept the question to herself. I will notify the Chancellor of the development as soon as we leave. I hope he will be pleased with the news. Any help is better than none. Kens forced a smile. That was good thinking back there, Awakened Noble. Doubtless, he would have continued to delay any sort of action without your help. I only did what I thought was right, Noble sighed. We all need to do our part. Well said, the director dipped his head. Right now that part includes you two going out and having a wonderful evening. Hopefully, if others see you enjoying yourselves, they will forget about Ty's unceremonious exit from the party. The disappearance of a rowdy party guest was likely to raise a few eyebrows, but as long as the rest of them behaved normally, the incident would blow over. Fort frowned. Are you telling me that my job right now, sir, is to go out and have fun at a party with my wife? His mouth opened wide in feigned astonishment. That is exactly what I am saying. Ken's relaxed into a more natural grin. Are you up to the challenge? The deputy director bowed. I most humbly accept this assignment. I shall do my best to make the government proud. Good. Thankfully you won't need your acting skills. If you don't mind me saying, you have a good wife right there. Ken's patted the man on the shoulder as he departed. Not just a good one. The best one. Ford took Noble's hand and looked deep into the woman's eyes. You heard the director. Duty calls. Would you care to dance? Noble clicked her tongue softly. Is this a professional dance or a personal one? Ford pursed his lips. Both. Yeah, I will go with both. Can't a man occasionally mix business with pleasure? Noble's eyes swirled slightly with amusement. Just this once, I suppose he can. The couple danced happily for the next few hours. Eventually, it was time to go. The government contingency made sure to thank their host before departing. Whispering Blade and his wife were very cordial, and soon all of the remaining members of the group were passing under the vermilion banner once more. But that was as far as they got. The line for the PTVs was to the door. While the others chatted idly, Ken's pulled out his communicator. I will ask our driver where he is in this blasted mess. One of the valets, a mundane young man who was likely barely old enough to drive, rushed up to the group and bowed. Are you Master Ken's? I am. The director looked at the valet curiously. I was asked to give you this. Sweat poured down the boy's forehead. He handed over a slip of synthetic cardstock with the PTV's company logo on the front. Ken's turned over the card and read the note in the back. His expression soured. What's wrong? Ford could see that something had agitated the master. The others ceased their chatter to listen. Seems we will be walking to our PTV, the director answered. The driver has been trying to get a hold of me on my communicator, but the messages are not going through. He says that he doesn't want to come to the entrance and asks that we meet him at the front gate. Why would he ask that? Is Ty still here and throwing a drunken fit? The lady in a pink peppered dress asked. The others mumbled similar frustrations. Did the driver say anything to you? Ken's asked the young man. I just deliver the messages. The valet held up his hands defensively. He looked anxiously at the long line of waiting guests and furrowed his brow. If you like, I can get someone to shuttle you to the front gate. Please follow me. The young man walked them to the end of the curved driveway while making a call. Someone will be with you shortly. Ken's thanked the valet. It is better than walking, he reminded the others when he saw their discontent faces. It was hard to disagree. Deciding not to grumble, they instead discussed the highlights of the evening. All, that is, except for the deputy director. All right, what is wrong? Ford whispered as his wife leaned up against him to protect herself from the night air. It's nothing. Noble looked up and gave him a weary smile. I am just ready to be home. Thank you for bringing me. The dancing was magical. Other parts of the evening were less magical, though. The man pressed. You know they were. The professor shook her head. You helped the government get Valor to agree to assist us. You are a hero in my book. Ford kissed the top of his wife's head. Do you really believe that? You believe that I am the only reason that the White Feather clan is going to Antarctica? Noble searched her husband's face for the answer. I do. The deputy director hugged his wife tightly. Then I am the reason they will suffer against the tide of nightmare creatures. They will be fighting for humanity's sake while I am here like a coward safe in the NQSC. It isn't fair to them. I have all but doomed them. Noble could feel her eyes shifting colors, but she hoped the darkness was enough to shield them from the others' views. At that moment a small electric cart puttered along the walking path. I am told you need a ride to the gate, the driver of the cart said with a small salute. Her wrinkled clothes were not up to Valor's standards. Perhaps that was why she had been assigned cart duty instead of something more important. Maybe this duty is another one of Maddox Punishment's honors. The 8 guests piled onto the benches of the electric cart, leaving Noble and Ford on the back rear-facing seat alone. It was the easiest way to let Noble float a little higher than normal on the bumpy buggy without anyone noticing. The cart took off with a bit of a lurch. Sorry. The driver chirped. Oh, look at that, Alice exclaimed when she spotted a beautiful garden in the moonlight. Valor had worked hard to make the fortress as enchanting as it was functional. Their attention to detail was unmatched. Alice and the others pointed out each and every detail as they rode. The pair in the back of the cart, however, were too deep in conversation to notice. You haven't doomed anyone, Ford assured his wife as they drove across the grounds. And staying here doesn't make you a coward, doesn't it? I know what kind of destruction is coming, and I am more than willing to put others' necks on the line, but not my own. Noble blew out her cheeks. Fort's muscles tensed. Don't you dare say what I think you are about to. I think I should go to Antarctica. Noble nodded. On you went and said it anyway. You cannot go. Fort's words surprised the woman. She had expected disagreement, but not outright refusal. Why not? The professor was genuinely curious. Think about this. If all of the competent awakened go to Antarctica, who will be left here to protect us when a gate opens in the NQSC? It has happened before and chances are good that it will happen again. If everyone is off in the winter playground, the rest of us here will be lost. Honey, the boys and I, we need you. Fort's stunning eyes pled just as much as his words. But, Noble sighed, unsure of the best tactic against her husband's logic. Fort took his wife's hand and squeezed it. Just don't make any rash decisions right now when we are both tired. We can discuss it more in the morning. For now, let's enjoy what is left of our date. As you wish, my love, on both things. We can find something happier to discuss. Look at that. Noble pointed out a shrub gleaming in the moonlight. It had been trimmed to look like a sword piercing an anvil. They really do commit to their emblem, don't they? Fort wasn't sure whether to be impressed or concerned. I wonder if it is embroidered on the family's bath towels as well. If we had a family crest, you can bet I would be putting that thing on anything and everything. You want cookies? They would proudly bear our family's symbol. Maybe we should start our own clan just for the crest, Noble teased. Talking about becoming a legacy. Now I know you are exhausted. Fort laughed. I better get you home right away and straight to your pod. Are you kidding? I could have danced all night. If anything, I'll be the one putting you to bed. Noble's smile faded. What, you suddenly don't like the idea of putting me to bed? That awakened strength is more than enough to carry little old me. Fort's voice trailed off as his wife scanned the area. Something is not right, she whispered. What do you mean? The deputy director tried to remain calm. I'm not sure. The professor turned her head toward the front of the cart. Kenz, who was riding next to the driver in the open cart, straightened in his seat. I don't remember passing by this on the way in. The awakened behind the wheel turned a corner in the compound. The cart snaked between two tightly packed buildings. The walls were so close that the vehicle nearly scraped both sides. The driver shrugged. I am taking a shortcut. She's lying, Noble called frantically. She could feel the driver's emotions spike when she spoke. They were not heading to the front gate at all. Unfortunately, the professor's voice was overshadowed by the sudden screech of tires as the vehicle came to a stop. They were at a dead end. The woman escorting them frowned. I must have taken a wrong turn. One moment. Stop her, Noble yelled, but it was too late. The driver seemed to disappear into thin air. Her emotional signature evaporated with her. The lights in the alley went out. Thinking quickly, Ken slid into the driver's seat and threw the cart into reverse. The side closest to Fort raked against the wall in a spray of sparks. The deputy director pulled back just in time to keep from crushing his hand when the armrest collided and sheared off. Kenz pushed the vehicle to its limit, forcing it to reverse at full speed. Fort was glad the director knew how to drive at all. Get down, the master cried. A spark on the hood of the vehicle was punctuated by a loud hiss. We are under attack, one of the ladies screamed. Her mouth was quickly covered. Kenz considered abandoning the vehicle in search of the assailant. If he could find the culprit in the darkness, he would make them pay. The master was infuriated that he had been tricked into an ambush. But then Kenz thought of the three mundane humans with him. His job first and foremost was to get them to safety. And that was not easy in the confined space. He clenched his jaw. Put down some cover while I get us out of here. Someone in the seat behind him summoned a memory. An oversized shield began to form over the top of the open cart, but not before another invisible projectile came flying their way. It blew through the floorboards next to Fort's feet. He scrambled onto the seat to avoid falling through the hole. Frantically, the cart continued to grind against the wall as the tires spun. The shield memory solidified just in time for a third hit to ricochet off of the tempered metal. Go. Kenz twisted the steering wheel and the cart came free of the alley. Stay down and hold on. The director ordered. He turned and drove as fast as the cart would let him back toward the main road. The vehicle thumped along, barely keeping control. Another one of the unseen projectiles must have hit one of the tires. It was a rough ride. But no more invisible missiles came tumbling in their direction. Wherever the assassin had attacked from must have finally gotten out of range. We'll get to the main road as soon as we can, Kenz called over his shoulder. Is everyone all right? The voices echoed and overlapped under the large shield, but it seemed like no one was seriously hurt. At least, no one was crying out in pain. It was possible that someone could have died, but surely their neighbor would have reported it, if they could see them. The deputy director pushed aside the thought for more pressing matters. He hadn't yet heard from his wife. "Are you all right, my love?" Fort squinted to pierce the darkness. The adjustable shield was like a canopy over them. It was keeping them safe, but also blocking any light from penetrating the space beneath. Noble didn't answer, and Fort furrowed his brow. "Are you in pain? Did you hit the seat of the cart too many times?" If the woman had gotten one really good hit with the ground, the professor could be suffering immeasurable agony. Fort was met with silence once again. While still holding onto the seat, he reached out with his other arm to pull his wife into a hug. That is when he realized. Noble was gone. Dash 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 dash. Before the first hit landed in the hood of the vehicle, Noble was already aware of the incoming attack. If she had been paying better attention, she would have recognized the driver's strange appearance and behavior before they had made it to the dead end. She felt so stupid, so when she suddenly sensed someone on the roof, the professor sprang into action. Without a word, Noble leapt from the cart and flew around the corner. Then, she lifted high into the air. The sound of the first shot hit her ears just before she reached the roof. There was no time to lose. Sparks surrounded her body as the familiar black and gold armor enveloped her torso. She lamented the loss of her dress, but there was no getting around it. She needed to keep herself and the others safe. That would require her best armor and most faithful weapon. The fraudulent facade and unlikely end manifested a moment after as Noble peeked over the top of the building. "I don't see anyone." Keeping close to the wall, the professor crouched as she glided along the flat stone surface. Screaming rang out below. Noble hoped no one was hurt, but she knew better than to go and see. Her best option was to stop whoever was attacking. But there were just too many shadows. The figure remained hidden. Not for long. Noble shut her eyes. The world took shape in colors that had no names. Most of the things in the professor's altered vision lay dull and lifeless. Without the emotional component, objects were dim in this altered state of being. It had taken great effort for Noble to make them appear at all without being held by a human. That is why the figure moving in the darkness was lit up like a beacon in her view. The figure knelt in the shadows at the corner of the roof. It wavered slightly in her vision. Their emotional reading was erratic and garbled. Something was being used to hide the assailant from view, and it was interfering Noble's special sight as well. They did not want to be seen. Despite the dire circumstances, a smile crept onto her face. "Found you." The assassin was shifting to find a new angle. She had to stop them before they found a clear line of sight. Moving silently forward, Noble gripped her estoc in her hand. One quick strike and it would all be over. Did she really have it in her to kill someone in cold blood? She had ended countless lives in the dreamscape, but this was the waking world. People did not disappear in a rain of sparks. They bled and died never to be seen again. But this person was trying to murder the people in the cart below. People she knew and cared about. Fort was down there. He needed to be protected at all costs. So even though her soul ached to preserve all human life, her sword lifted high into the air. And swung. Despite Noble's near-silent movement, the assassin perceived a change in the air. Rolling to one side, he missed the unlikely end and his own by a hair's breadth. The estoc landed against the ledge of the roof, scraping the raised stone edge. Only a small nick of the rock came free, a testament to the strength of the fortress. Noble's eyes instinctively popped open to assess the extent of the damage to her sword. Thankfully, there was none. The blade was as pristine as ever. She turned to face her enemy. The assassin landed in a low crouch, his long-range weapon already dissolving into sparks while he summoned a new one. An inky black bodysuit clung tight to his skin with a matching onyx strip of fabric wound around his head. The only part of his face that was exposed was his piercing eyes. They opened wide in surprise. "Queen Bee." The hoarsely whispered words were halfway between a question and an exclamation. Noble felt a spike in his emotion. The actual feeling was garbled by some protective memory, but the professor did not need her heightened senses to know she had set the assassin on edge. Only someone truly insane would remain unbothered when nearly losing their head. The attacker held up his hands. If he surrendered, it would make things much easier. Noble was anxious to subdue the assailant and check on the others. She could hear the scraping of steel on stone below as well as all the frantic screams. But of course, the man across from her had no intention of admitting defeat. He was merely buying time for his memory to manifest. Noble could not give him that time. Lightning fast, she swiped her blade at his neck. He ducked away a second time to avoid being obliterated by the enchanted sword. Bee's follow-up move was equally dodged. How is that possible? It was like the man could read her moves a split second before they happened. Noble would have to be quicker. At last, two memories finished forming in each of the man's hands. One was a long dado, while the other was its shorter counterpart, a wakizashi. The two swords gleamed ominously in the moonlight. I was wrong. He is insane. With a deep breath, the professor let her duelist training take over. She refused to let herself consider the possibility of defeat. Queen Bee would not allow herself to be intimidated by a man just because he was wielding two swords. Chances were he didn't even know how to use them effectively. Those chances were wrong. As soon as the swords fully manifested, the assassin sped forward with frightening speed. He struck from two different directions with the blades, knowing Bee would only be able to block one effectively. The queen had barely a moment to think. But a moment was more than enough. Her eyes glowed. The assassin felt his feet lift from the floor as he dangled, kicking in the air. Bee could have done this move sooner. She hadn't for a good reason. As long as he had the long-range weapons in his hand, he would have still been a menace to the people on the ground. Bee could hover him above the ground and do other broad movements, but she could not manipulate him like a puppet. This was something the assassin realized as well. He flung the shorter sword at Bee, aiming straight for her heart. The woman moved her estoc to block the blow, momentarily losing focus on her initial target. The dark figure hit the ground and went running, only to make it a couple of steps before being lifted into the air again. He grunted. What now? The duelist frowned behind her fraudulent facade. She had resolved to do what needed to be done to save the others from harm. But now that they were clear of the danger, Bee was left with a dilemma. The awakened could end the man's life. That was the cleanest solution to the problem. It would keep him from coming after her at a future date. Cleanest doesn't always mean best. In the precious seconds that Bee deliberated, the man clad in black summoned a belt around his waist. The metal chain wrapped him tightly, suddenly causing him to weigh as much as a building. Not even using all of her essence could Noble combat such gravity. She inhaled sharply as her reserves were quickly pulled from her core. Ah, it hurt like she was being squeezed. The longer she resisted the pull, the worse the pressure got. You want to come back down? Have it your way. Noble reversed her lifting power to add to the pull, slamming her opponent against the roof. He crashed, causing the area to shake. Small cracks formed in the stone structure, but miraculously the building held. Surely someone heard that. That was assuming someone was inside the building at this time of night. Noble had no idea what this place was used for. Whether the person who might hear it would be a friend or foe was another matter. She couldn't ponder all the possibilities. With his feet back on the ground, the assassin wasted no time in attacking her. He surged forward with the dado gleaming in his hand. It crashes against Bee's estoc, sending the woman backward. She gritted her teeth. The fight continued with exchanges of blows. Bee wasn't sure how much time had passed. It felt like an eternity, but it was likely less than 2 minutes. The man was fearless to the point of recklessness. He clearly knew that his future, his whole life, hung on the outcome of the fight. So he gave it all he had. Bee met him stroke for stroke. She took on a cautious stance. Her mind was at war with itself on what to do. Capture or kill. Beyond her distaste for murder, she really wanted answers. But there was also the vanishing woman. If she appeared up here, two opponents would be much harder to manage. The lack of decision made her unwilling to commit to a definitive style. If she didn't make a choice soon, the option would be selected for her. With her death, the skilled attacker made an overhanded swing to bring the prediction into reality. Bee barely jumped back in time. The long dado cut a deep gash in her breastplate, causing it to crack. I have to end this. She slashed her sword twice in quick succession, forcing the man to back off. Then, on the third pass, she poured a touch of essence into the unlikely end. The tip of the blade pierced the assassin's hand. He screamed and pulled his arm to his chest. That was a mistake. Bee whipped her blade back toward herself, disarming the man of his long sword. He had no choice but to dismiss it before it clattered to the ground. He was already summoning the vicious wakizashi short blade in his other hand. But Bee did not give him enough time. She kicked him backward, knocking the air out of him as he sprawled out on the ground. Noble brought the estoc to his neck, warning him not to move. The assassin sighed. Go on, finish me off. It won't be the first time. Bee faltered. She knew that voice. She stared in disbelief at her attacker as a single word escaped through the fraudulent facade. Nick. Noble couldn't believe her ears. The whispering of her name had been barely audible, but his plea just now was crisp and clear. She knew that voice. It was none other than the observant librarian whom Bee had fought in the finals. The assassin was Nickel. How? Why? She stuttered. Do I know you? Nick's eyes narrowed. Wait. You can speak. Keeping the estoc in place, Noble chose her next words carefully. Don't move, and don't try anything. I do know you. You didn't call me unorganized laundry. You called me by my name. Who are you? Nickel tried to sit up only to feel the point dig against his neck. I said don't move. Now who sent you? Like I am going to tell you that. Nickel dismissed the memory around his head. When the black cloth faded, the strange aura around him disappeared. Bee could feel his emotions and see his face clearly. Both said he was amused. Just kill me. Not yet, she threatened. I am going to interrogate you first. Nickel's expression changed. Noble. Blazing bees. Ah, it is you, isn't it? I should have known. Nickel tried to lift his head. At least tell me I am right before you end me. If the professor let him get arrested, it wouldn't take much for him to confirm his suspicion based on who was in the cart. And if he died, the secret would die with him. I need his help. Maybe this is the only way. Sighing, Noble shook her head. How did you know? You are the only person I've ever known who announces that they'll interrogate me. He shrugged slightly. Now if you will excuse me. Oh no you don't. Noble sent a little essence into the end of her estoc. The buzzing of the sword warned Nickel to stay put. Why did you just try to kill us? Be careful with that, will you? You already got my hand tonight. I don't want a repeat of the finals. Nickel pressed his lips together. I didn't know you would be with the government contingency. It wasn't personal. Nothing personal. You tried to murder me. Wait, that girl, that wasn't Ren, was it? Noble knew of memories that could alter appearance. Up until the woman had lied, the professor had not been paying much attention to her. The librarian suddenly became defensive. Ren has nothing to do with this. I don't know the person who brought you here. I only knew that someone from the government would come. I was only doing my job. I don't think this is in the job description of a librarian. Noble frowned. Not that job. Nick looked away, unwilling to meet her eye. Noble clicked her tongue. You have a second job. One that makes you murder people. Not usually. And I didn't kill anyone. At least not this time. Everyone should be fine. The professor could sense his remorse. He didn't want to be on that rooftop any more than she did. You didn't want to kill them. Who were you even after? Master Ken's. It didn't matter as long as I got someone. Thankfully, Nickel had failed at his mission. And you were alright with that. Just offing someone for reasons you don't even understand. Noble couldn't fathom such disregard for human life. It's complicated. Not everyone has the same options that you do, Noble. Nick's voice was filled with bitterness. Whether it was toward her or the situation, she didn't know. And to think I assumed that was just a persona in the dreamscape. I never would have imagined that you were doing things like this. Wait. Saint Thane. That wasn't an accident, was it? The thought hit Noble all at once. Nickel chuckled. I spent years trying to get close to him. Thane is so elusive that he didn't even attend the group finals last year. When you suggested that QueenBee might make a group, I realized that might bring him to the party. It did. He was more than a little proud that his plan had worked. Noble was confused by his vibrato. But you barely scraped him. The librarian smirked. That's all that was needed. I just had to disrupt his hold on the dreamscape for a moment. To cause a moment of vulnerability in his kingdom. Why? Nick's smile faded. That, I do not know. The war has been coming for a long time, and I'm just a small piece. War. Noble's mind began to race. Did he mean the war for Antarctica? There is so much you don't know, Noble. Clans Valor and Song have always quietly been struggling against one another, but things are about to change. What was once a silent battle will be an open war. The professor felt like she had been struck. She knew the two clans were not particularly friendly towards one another, but open hostility would rip the human world apart. Where did the Dreamscape Saint and she fit into that? Maybe the act against Thane was a warning, maybe it was something more. Would Noble and her family get caught in the crossfire as well? She realized they already were. So, You were sent to make sure the government doesn't take Valor's side in the coming conflict. Nickel nodded. A murder at the clan's manor, even if it wasn't Valor's fault, would show their weakness. The mirror master who sent me was firm on that point. He said if I didn't do it, he would take care of things in my stead. I didn't want to find out what he meant. Mirror master, that was oddly specific. Why was the man admitting all of this so freely? Only one reason came to mind. If you are trying to get away from this life, come tell the government what you just told me. They will protect you. You are funny. Nickel laughed dryly. Noble's eyes swirled faster. I mean it. You know Fort is a good man. It is going to take more than a good man, Noble. Even if I wanted to get out, it would take a miracle. Nickel stared at her defiantly. Then we will make a miracle. Come with me willingly. As long as no one is dead, I am sure we can work something out. Noble was surprised as the librarian began to laugh in earnest. Ha, do you think for a second that Valor is going to let me leave alive if they know who I am? Try to take me back with you, and I'm as good as dead before sunrise. Nickel slid back slightly at the thought. The professor couldn't easily force him to come. The memory around his waist meant she could not float him back to the main part of the manor. She doubted very much that he would dismiss it if she said please. Help was slow in coming as well. You promised that no one was seriously hurt by your attack. She waved the point of the sword slightly. I hit the engine but not the people. If that cart makes it back in one piece, I would be shocked. Nickel answered honestly. That explained the delay. The government officials were walking. If I let you go, will you promise to at least come and talk to Fort about this incident? Noble monitored his emotions closely. If that is what it is going to take to save my skin, I'll even take him out to lunch and buy him jewelry, but I make no promises on what I will say. His mix of sarcasm and lack of commitment made it hard for the professor to get an exact read on him. She needed to lower his guard. Did you lose on purpose in the Dreamscape? The professor felt Nickel's emotions shift suddenly. What, are you kidding? You held your own against Mongrel. There was no way you weren't going to win. The man meant his words. Then you know what I am capable of. I will let you go tonight, but if you break your word, I will find you. And I will not be so understanding next time. Noble let the words sink in. The librarian considered her words and nodded. A talk. I will give them what I think they need to know but nothing more, he agreed. Noble nodded. At least for that moment, he believed what he said was true. She removed the blade from his neck. Go. Dismissing her armor, Noble turned her back on the librarian. He disappeared into the night. Noble. A door to the roof opened, and the woman turned to see her husband surrounded by a dozen of Valor's guards. He broke free of the group and ran to embrace her. Where is the assassin, ma'am? One of the soldiers asked brusquely. The professor took a deep breath. He's gone. The guards immediately checked the roof to confirm Noble's words. Fort blocked his wife with his body. Your dress, he whispered. Noble looked down. While the bodice of the gown had remained intact under her armor, the skirt was ruined. Dresses and suits of armor did not mix. I really like this outfit. Noble summoned the loyal tabard. The cloth worked as a tunic and laid gently over what was left of her gown. Better, she asked her husband with a weary smile. Depends. Are you all right? With his wife's wardrobe malfunction fixed, Fort began to check her body for injury. I am fine. How is everyone else? The professor needed to make sure that Nickel's assertion was accurate. Everyone was alive when I left. Are you sure that you aren't hurt? The man's examination became more intense. Noble pulled her arm away gently. All is well. You don't need to worry about me. She reassured him. I always worry about you, and don't you try to stop me, Fort said sharply, startling her. His tone softened. You just disappeared. What was I supposed to think? I'm sorry. That must have been terrifying. I'm glad you didn't come barreling back here by yourself. The professor looked around at the awakened guards of Valor. He had brought a considerable amount of muscle with him. I tried. I abandoned the others and ran this way. But I couldn't get into the building until Valor arrived. Fort, Noble wanted to protect her husband, and the foolish man had put himself right back into danger. You ran off, so can I, he countered, shutting her argument off at the head. She looked down, ashamed. Next time, I will let you know what I am doing and not just vanish. Let's hope there isn't a next time. Fort pulled the woman close. His frustration and fear were overwhelmed by his relief. Ma'am, can you tell us what they looked like? One of the guards asked. He was clad in black and had a face covered with a cloth. I did not see which way he ran. But I think he had an accomplice, our female driver. Master Kens can give you a better description of her, I believe. Noble rattled off the details to the soldier of valor. All of it was true, though it wasn't particularly helpful. Seeing he would get no more information, the guard motioned to one of his companions. Take them back to Manor. By the time the couple arrived back at the main house, a healer was waiting to check Noble for injury. After the professor was given a clean bill of health, she was offered fresh clothing and given the family's deepest apologies. I am glad you are well, Whispering Blade's wife said as she handed over some of her personal garments for Noble to wear. The guards say the confrontation cracked the roof. It must have been quite a fight. It was. Noble accepted the clothing with a dip of her head. We will get to the bottom of this, the stately woman nodded. Noble could feel the anger inside her that something had happened in her house. A war is coming. Nickel's words came back to her. Was the woman before her part of that war or just another victim like herself? Thank you for the dress. Noble excused herself to change. Their original PTV driver was eventually found. After returning from dropping off Awakened Ty and Awakened Shelby, he had been drugged. The government officials were given a ride home by Clan Valor's personal chauffeurs. Alone in the back of one of the cars, Fort took his wife's hand. There was so much he wanted to say, but could not when the others were around. Even in the PTV, the driver would be able to eavesdrop on their conversation. Understanding Fort's desire, Noble called forth the other's voice and covertly handed one half to her husband. She then tucked her hair behind her ear, simultaneously putting the small memory in place. Can you hear me? She asked through the memory. How does this work? Do I have to think it towards you? Fort's voice entered her head. He glanced toward the driver, but the man did not seem to be aware that anything had changed. If you want the thought to remain private, it will. Otherwise, I can hear it. To be honest, I am not exactly sure how it decides what thoughts to send. All Noble knew was that it worked. I am glad you are okay. What happened back there? Fort had noticed his wife was very tight-lipped with Valor around. I fought the attacker and won. But then I let him go. Noble closed her eyes as the reply came into her mind like a scream. What? Fort did everything he could to keep his face neutral, but his lips still parted in a stifled gasp. How could you let him go? Valor would never have let him leave with us. They would have tortured and killed him before the night was over. We never would have gotten answers on who was behind the attack. The professor squeezed her husband's hand. Fort shook his head slowly. How will we get answers now? You said you let him go. Nickel promised he is going to find you and speak to you. Noble braced herself for another outburst. But the response this time was eerily calm. Nickel, the librarian who is also a Dreamscape duelist. Yeah, that makes sense. Wait, you are taking that news better than I expected. The professor could feel her husband was still very emotional, but the fact that she knew the attacker had quieted some of his fears. If we know who it is, that makes things much easier, he answered simply. Don't do anything crazy. It was Noble's turn to be alarmed. The deputy director looked deep into his wife's eyes. If he comes to me on his own, I won't have to. Noble hoped things would go peacefully between them, but it was out of her hands. She glanced out the window. There's more. Nickel said there is a war coming between the clans. Song and Valor are usually at odds. Fort began. This sounds like more than that. Much more. If Nick is right and they are fighting each other, then they won't have time to fight against the real problem, the gates in Antarctica. If they are going to be useless, then Awaquend like myself have to step up too. We can talk about that in the morning. I don't have the strength to consider losing you again tonight. Fort suddenly looked a dozen years older. The words were a bucket of cold water on the flames she was fanning. I love you. She laid her head on his shoulder. I am glad you are all right. I love you too. He put his arm around her. They rode the rest of the way home in silence. They entered their home just as the first light was peeking over the horizon. Thankfully, the house was still quiet. None of the kids were awake. On the living room couch, a woman was slumped over, having fallen asleep watching something on her communicator. She was startled awake when the door shut. Mom. Noble was surprised to see Lena in her house. Are the kids all right? Did something happen? Everything is fine. I just dozed off waiting for you to get home. Fort called me because he wasn't sure when you would be back. He didn't want the kids to worry. Lena explained. I see. I just didn't realize you would be coming over. Noble remembered asking Fort to message her mother while she was being examined. Apparently, the two had decided it would be best for the grandmother to go and check on her grandkids. Neither of the adults had wanted to wake Honey and upset her. Now that you are back, I can go home, Lena stretched. The stretch made Noble yawn. No, I am glad you are here. You need to go to sleep, my love. Fort could see all the warning signs. I'll take over for now. You need sleep too, she protested. Wasn't her body more resilient than his mundane one? He wasn't the one fighting a killer. Lena looked sharply at her daughter. Now, go to bed. Fort and I will handle things. The older woman held up her hand to stall the professor's argument. Noble sighed. Yes, mother. Now that she was home again, it turned out Noble was more tired than even she realized. The moment the pod closed, she was already fast asleep. Most of Noble's time in the dream realm was spent sleeping in her room. While it wasn't strictly necessary, the exhaustion in her soul needed something that only real rest could provide. Noble slept long and hard. As expected, the sleep was dreamless. Yet, when the professor awoke, Antarctica and the White Feather clan were already on her mind. I cannot let them go and defend a continent while I do nothing. What kind of person lets others fight and remains home like a coward? I'll have to tell Fort. Fort. Noble sat up suddenly. She looked around the sparsely furnished room as she untied the tether keeping her in midair. What time was it? How long had she been gone? Lowering herself near the ground, the professor hurried out into the street. Oh no, looking at the sun, Noble could tell she had slept most of the day away. She always came back as soon as she was able. Hopefully, they wouldn't worry too much that she was late. Hurrying along the path, the professor ignored the familiar darkness that threatened to crawl up from the chasm. It might be a threat to those who could lose their footing and fall off the side, but it was no danger to her. She raced along as if it didn't exist. Coming to the gaping maw in the heart of Ender's Deep, Noble left the citadel without looking back. The pod propelled open. In her haste, Noble almost forced her feet to touch the floor. She barely pulled back in time. A fresh blouse and pants were hanging in the dojo to replace the gown given to her the night before. Thank you, my love. The saint's wife had been very kind to offer her wardrobe, but the two of them did not exactly have the same style. Noble was glad to avoid the awkward question from her daughter about her sudden taste in clothes. I'm here, Noble called while closing the door to the dojo. Sorry I am late. The twins came barreling down the hall and wrapped her in a sandwich hug. Mom. Blaze squeezed as hard as he could. You're back. Brock buried his face in her stomach before releasing her. You are already home from school. Noble had taken off work in advance, and Fort had been given a day because the party counted as work for him. The kids' schedules had not been altered. We got home a while ago. Blaze looked rather confused. Do you know what time it is? I suppose I don't, Noble admitted. What time is it? Dinner time. Fort from the kitchen. Everyone wash up. A matronly voice followed the first. Grandma is still here. Noble took each of the boys' hands as they walked down the hall. I think she left and came back. Blaze squished his face in concentration. At least, she rode in the PTV with us to school. I assume she went home after that. Noble couldn't remember the last time she had really slept in the dream realm. But she still felt groggy. Why would her mother ride with the boys to school? Something wasn't adding up. The scene in the kitchen was an even more confusing sight. A veritable feast was laid out on the table with Lena and Fort both wearing aprons. Welcome home. Fort went and kissed his wife. She smiled despite her confusion as she wiped a bit of flour from his cheek. Thank you. What is all this? We thought you might be extra hungry after such a long night and so much time in the dream realm. My son was kind enough to let me take over the kitchen to make some of our favorite dishes. Lena had a habit of calling Fort her son. His parents were long gone, and she firmly believed every young person should have someone to call mom. It smells amazing. Noble sniffed at the air. It also smells like a scheme. While what her mother had said was true, both Fort and Lena had underlying emotions that they were hiding something from her. But she would bide her time and discover it when she could. There was no reason to ignore such a meal. Honey arrived a moment later from her room. Did I hear? Mom, are you all right? She hugged her mother. Noble patted the girl's hair. I am fine. Why do you look so upset? It is just, you are never in your pod when I get home from school. I thought maybe. Honey's lip quivered. I seem to have unnecessarily worried all of you. I fell asleep in the dream realm and woke up much later than I expected. I don't have an alarm clock there. Perhaps I should find a way to get one. Noble shook her head at her own tardiness. But I made it back for the most important part of the day. Let's eat. It turned out Lena was right. Noble was famished. The steak, baked potatoes, pasta, fried chicken, synthetic sweet rolls, and all of the sides were eaten and fully enjoyed. By the time the professor was finished, she felt like she needed to push herself up from the ground, not hold herself down from floating away. That was delicious. Thank you to the chefs. Noble patted her stomach obligingly. I will do the dishes. You mean your powers will? Lena smiled. Fine. My ability will do the dishes for us. Noble stuck out her tongue playfully, drawing a laugh from her mother. Asking to be dismissed, the children hurried to their rooms to finish their homework. The adults were left alone. The plates lifted from the table, making their way to the foamy water waiting for them in the sink. I suppose this is the part where we finally talk. The awakened raised her eyebrows at the other two. Why, is there something you want to talk about? Lena challenged. How much did Fort tell you? Noble narrowed her gaze. She loved that her husband and mother got along very well, but sometimes that seemed to work to his disadvantage. He told me enough that I know to be concerned for you for more than one reason. How are you holding up? Lena stroked her daughter's arm, filling Noble with warmth. The older woman had no awakened powers, yet somehow she always had a healing touch. I am making it, Noble answered honestly. And since you are both here, I wanted to tell you the decision I have made. Fort and Lena exchanged glances. Is this about Antarctica? Lena asked pointedly. Noble's eyes opened wide. How did you know about Antarctica? If it is, we have something we want to say as well, Fort continued without addressing the question. But please go first. The floating awakened steadied her nerves. I have been thinking about it. I know this dinner was probably meant to show me what I will be missing, but it only made me more firm in my decision. I want to go and help the cause. There is nothing you can do to change my mind. Ford nodded slowly. I see. I completely understand how you feel. I guess that means it is time for my news. Your bags are mostly packed. We leave in the morning. Did he just agree with me? Noble had been forming her argument to combat her mother and husband's rebuttal. Come again. Did you say, we? Ford motioned toward their bedroom. I got us suitcases earlier today and packed them with what I thought we would need. I would appreciate it if you looked through to make sure I didn't forget anything. You what? Noble's mouth hung open. You said you wanted to go and help the evacuation efforts, didn't you? We have no time to waste. Ford looked at her seriously. Lena gave her son-in-law a sharp look. All right, you have given her enough of a shock. It's time to explain. She patted her daughter's hand. You asked how I knew about what is going on in Antarctica. Yes, Noble nodded, happy to have a starting point for the confusing conversation. I was brought in as a consultant a while back. Other than Lance, I saw more of what went right and wrong last time around than most anyone. The Chancellor thought my expertise might be useful in streamlining the process. It's not like I haven't done government work before. While Noble had translated all of her father's documents, it seemed Lena had been brought on to interpret and help implement what they said. It was no wonder that Fort and Lena were talking even more than usual. While interesting, what does that have to do with me? The professor still felt like she was missing a piece of the puzzle. Lena winced. Well, I was supposed to head to the closest port tomorrow to look over the civilian intake process. We need to have a plan for when the people of Antarctica arrive on our shores. Do you remember how I told you I was going to be unavailable for a couple of weeks? That was why I was leaving town to help expedite that process. But you aren't now. Noble noticed how her mother had spoken in the past tense about a future event. It seems my awkward rest on the couch last night has tweaked my back. After consulting my physician, he is of the opinion that I am not fit to travel. Lena touched the small of her back. Noble clicked her tongue sharply. Yet you had the ability to make so much food without a second thought. It wore me out completely. Think about how much more effort will be required at the military installation. Lena did look more ragged than usual, Noble noted. There was at least some truth to her claim. I am sorry you are in pain. It is my fault. The professor had been the reason that Lena had needed to come and check on the children, and her late return just now meant that the older woman had to shoulder more of the cooking responsibilities. Don't blame yourself, Lena allowed a faint smile. But I know you will anyway. This brings me to the favor I have asked of you and Fort. I would like you to go to the port in my place. I see. Noble looked at her husband. And since my bag is already packed, I assume you have already agreed on my behalf. Fort held up his hands quickly. I agreed for myself only. Your answer is still pending. It didn't take much to figure out that Fort and Lena had orchestrated this. The professor chewed her lip. Fort cannot go, he is supposed to be waiting for someone to contact him. That situation is well in hand. I am rather impressed with the resourcefulness of your librarian friend. Fort nodded. Don't worry, I believe we have reached a mutually beneficial arrangement. Noble knew she could ask no more questions on the matter just then, so she steered back to the original issue. Why did they need her to travel at all? Couldn't you just get someone who is already there to gather all the information you need? Lena considered her words. It was certainly an option. The problem with that is I am not sure what I do and do not need to know. I have no idea what is there or how to best implement it. You are my daughter. If anyone knows how I think and what I would like to see, it is you. I can give you my notes and requests, but I think you will intuitively know what else needs to be recorded. And this change has already been approved. In less than a day. The professor raised one eyebrow. That is not how the government works. This is a top priority. It was run up the chain very quickly, Ford explained. That is code for they called in a few favors. Noble decided to keep the thought to herself. You are making a face, the one like you drank sour milk. Are you thinking you don't want to go? The deputy director frowned. Blinking, the professor brought her eyes back from their swirling to blue. I wasn't meaning to make a face. I'm thinking, how long would we be gone? With travel, probably a week and a half. Maybe a little more. Fort gave a tight smile. The plans were rather fluid if he was being honest. Until they had boots on the ground and looked at what was needing to be completed, an exact timeframe was impossible to give. What about the kids? What about my work at the academy? Noble could not just neglect her other responsibilities. I'll watch the kids while you are gone, Lena offered. But you're back. The only reason Noble was considering taking the trip at all was because her mother couldn't. The kids are old enough that they won't let me work myself too hard. And if I need anything, I can call your nice teacher friend, Julius, to help. He loves the kids and they love him, or so I'm told. Lena's eyes darted away. I don't even have time to unpack all the questions that I have from what you just said, Noble rubbed her forehead. As far as the academy goes, I am sure the armory has some memories you can look over for your research. We can use that to explain your absence. And it is still 6 months before the solstice, so you can take a week's break from classes while B2 runs the memory chamber for you. Ford offered. Seems like you have already thought of everything. The professor fell silent. Glancing between her daughter and son-in-law, Lena cleared her throat. I think one of the kids needs help with their homework. Coming. I'll be back in a bit. She excused herself before either of the others could say they hadn't heard anything. Left alone, the couple looked at each other for a long time. I know this is a ploy. You are hoping I will change my mind about wanting to go to Antarctica by sending me to the port instead. Surely the deputy director hadn't forgotten what Noble said the night before. If Valor wasn't willing to do more, she would. Fort did not deny her accusation. My motive doesn't change the fact that this needs to be done. This is a job we can complete together. Do you not want to spend time with me while doing some good? The man jutted out his lips slightly. Now you aren't playing fair, Noble pouted. How am I supposed to fight against that? Ideally, you won't. The man winked. After grumbling for a moment, the professor crossed her arms. Fine, I will go with you to the army installation. But I reserve the right to reopen the Antarctica discussion as soon as we get home. That is fair and reasonable. Who knows, by then one of us may have changed our minds. Ford looked innocently as his wife narrowed her gaze. Yes, hopefully one of us will. Are you coming? Ford hurried onto the platform with their luggage. We have 2 minutes. We are going to miss our ride. No matter how much Noble tried to convince herself, her body would not move forward. She had made it to the depot without any problem, but the moment she saw the doors of the train, she froze. The professor clutched her handbag tightly. Stop being childish. You can do this. You get on trains daily. This one isn't any different. Except it was. The light rails used inside the city were sleek and streamlined. This one was a bulky, armored monstrosity with car after car attached for hundreds of meters. It was outfitted to withstand almost anything they would encounter in the wilderness as they traveled across the continent. And it looked eerily similar to the one she had taken to flee her home years before. The last time Noble had seen one of these intercontinental trains up close was when it was being consumed by a nightmare creature. Her body refused to get on board. We don't have to go, Ford whispered in her ear. I will find someone else to go in our place tomorrow. I should have thought about how this might upset you. I'm not upset, Noble whispered, I'm terrified. While it was illogical to assume this long-range ride would end as her last had, the feeling remained. She was locked in place. You go without me, she told Fort. Her husband felt a wave of relief and then shame. I am not leaving you here. At this point, either we both go or neither of us does. What if the same thing happens to you that happened to BB? The professor blinked back tears. What if I am dooming the whole train, the whole port, by going? Ford wrapped his arm around Noble's shoulder. What happened to your cousin was terrible, but I am not him. This train is better outfitted to meet threats. The military outpost is well equipped to face off against both land and water creatures. And, this is the most important part, we aren't fleeing from a gate. That last part was the biggest distinction. They weren't running away from danger. If anything, the couple was running toward it. Inhaling deeply through her nose, Noble steadied her nerves. You are right, as usual. I want that stitched on a pillow when we get home, the handsome man teased. All aboard. The call came over a loudspeaker, sending a new wave of panic through Noble. I can't. The professor stepped backward. Her foot accidentally smashed Fort's. Although her flaw didn't react to the contact, his foot certainly did. Her heel dug into the toe of his foot. Ouch, he cried, dropping the bags. Moving away quickly, Noble's eyes widened. Did I hurt you? No, Fort said through clenched teeth. He tried to take a step. A little, he admitted. Noble lifted the suitcases and her husband off of the ground and hurried down the length of the train. You can put me down. Fort floated like a balloon behind the awakened. I'm fine, but the professor was not listening. Passenger car, dining car, back there are the freight cars. She catalogued the different parts of the train in search of the one she desired. There, Noble quickened her pace. Where? Fort felt the sudden pull forward as the invisible string tugged him. Pushing open the door, which had already been closed, Noble addressed the shocked occupant as she hurried inside. My husband has been hurt. I need you to look at his foot. Do you have tickets for this train? If not, the young man stopped his speech when Noble flashed her communicator with their tickets and credentials. Forgive me, he dipped his head. I had no idea who you were. Please come in. Noble moved further into the car. The infirmary was empty except for the healer and the newcomers. Why wouldn't it be? They hadn't even left the station. Noble laid her husband down on the indicated bed. I am Mel. What seems to be the problem? The physician looked between the couple. My wife likes to overreact, Fort teased before wincing. I stepped on his foot. It was an accident. Noble did not help her cause by looking sick to her stomach. Fortunately, the doctor did not laugh at them. An awakened stepping on a mundane person's foot. And in those heels. Did you use extra force? Possibly. Noble wasn't sure. She hadn't walked on the ground in so long. The woman did not remember how much force was normal. The doctor took the information in stride. With permission, he began removing Fort's shoe and sock. By the husband's careful breathing, the healer knew he was in significant pain. Just another moment, Mel assured him. Noble gasped. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. The deputy director sat up enough to look down at his foot. The smallest of his toes was bent at the wrong angle in deep purple. Mel frowned. This is going to sting a little. How little? Can I get a second opinion before you? Oh. Fort screamed as the toe was set and tied off in one fluid movement. Noble grabbed his hand and held it. I'm so sorry. There. I have buddy wrapped it to the one next to it. The doctor leaned back to check his handiwork. Could you have at least given me something to dull the pain beforehand? Fort eyed the physician critically. I would have preferred to send you back to the train station for an awakened to tend to you. But that is no longer an option. The man sighed. Noble looked to a window and realized what he meant. The train was moving. The station had been replaced by the outskirts, which would soon be left behind as well. When had the train taken off and how had her body not told her? Oblivious to her thoughts, the doctor continued, there is usually not much need for field medicine on the transport. I mostly handle motion sickness or the occasional cold. When we get to the outpost, you can have a healer patch you up the rest of the way. Until then, digging through his supplies, the physician pulled out a crutch and some pain medication. I wish I could do more, Mel lamented. You've done more than enough, Fort smiled before swallowing the medicine. I'll be fine soon, and it got my wife on the train, so overall I think it was a tow well spent. Fort, Noble's mouth hung open. If I didn't know better, I would think you broke a bone on purpose. The man's eyes darted to one side. I had intended to stop you from running when I put my foot down, but I never thought this would be the end result. All's well that ends well, don't you think? The awakened professor prepared a biting retort only to look down at Fort's injured foot. I'm not sure that your end is well, she answered at last. Well, either way, we are both here and get to enjoy some quality time together. If you will help me get to our car, I might get my first real look at the countryside too. I've never been out of the NQSC. Noble nodded. Since they were already on the move, it was best to make themselves comfortable. She helped Fort to his feet. He wore a stupid grin. What is it now? The man shrugged. I suppose it is too soon to say that our trip has gotten off on the wrong foot. Pursing her lips, Noble gave her husband a sidelong glance. Way too soon. Thankfully, getting Fort to their accommodations kept Noble's mind from her crippling fear. By the time they made it to the car with their cabin, she was relieved to finally be in their place. The room was well furnished with both a bed for the deputy director and a pod for Noble. It looks nice, the woman nodded once in approval. Though I do not plan on going to the dream realm before we reach the port. Perhaps you should, that way we can get right to work as soon as we arrive. Fort grunted as he sat down in one of the two armchairs by the window. Noble placed his suitcase upright in front of him to give him a place to prop up his foot. The professor pursed her lips. I cannot leave without knowing you are safe. Have you seen this train? There is more heavy artillery on here than I could conceivably count. I don't think even a Category 5 gate could get to me if it wanted to. Fort's teasing grin faded. I'm sorry, that was careless of me. We didn't think the gate could get us last time either. We were very wrong. The professor blinked back tears. Fort beckoned her forward. She hovered over the arm of the plush chair, and he pulled her close. They spent a long time in silence looking at the landscape. It was mostly desolate from years of abuse and disuse, but plant life dotted the ground occasionally. Other things did too, like signs of past wars and the remains of dead nightmare creatures. The latter sight was actually comforting to Noble in a strange way. It meant that at least one train had fought and won against the foul beasts. Hours passed. Should we get some food? Fort offered when the sun was high in the sky. I hear the dining car got a recent upgrade. You'll have to find that out another time. I will go get us something and bring it back. Noble moved to the door. But Fort pushed his hands against the armrest in an attempt to stand, knocking down the suitcase and his foot in the process. He cried out in pain. Noble's eyes swirled. No buts, she clicked her tongue. The injured foot and suitcase floated back into place. You keep that foot up until I get back. Do you need to use the restroom before I go? No ma'am, the man answered, defeated. Moving back toward the window, Noble stole a kiss before leaving. I won't be long. In the hall, the woman realized that she wasn't sure which way the dining car was. She had seen it from the outside but had since lost track of its location. Forever unable to keep a map in your head, good job, Noble. With a sheepish smile, she asked an employee passing down the hall for directions. The dining car was 3 forward from her current location. Not too far. Moving between cars was rather dicey. As long as something solid was beneath her feet, the spell did not punish her by making her consciously move at the same speed as the train. It just happened naturally. The same was true for PTVs and other vehicles. But if both her feet accidentally went over the gap between cars at the same time. Oh, Noble was whipped backward and slammed into the door as the train continued its forward motion. In her attempt to fake a jump, both her feet had lingered over the empty space simultaneously. Which meant, for her, the ground had suddenly ceased moving, and so had she. How does that even make sense? The professor groaned, rubbing the back of her head where it had bumped against the reinforced polymer window. Ow! She looked back at the alloy door. It had barely a scratch from the encounter. It was made to withstand much more fearsome creatures than her. I think I am going to have a bruise or two from that. The professor was just glad the collision had not accidentally uncoupled the car. Her second attempt to cross the gap was successful. Placing one foot across and then the other like she had done when she was helping Fort caused her no issues whatsoever. Shaking off the encounter, Noble hurried to the dining car to retrieve their meals. Soft music permeated the air. I can't believe they made a smooth jazz version of Bored Beyond Belief. Wait until I tell Fort. After ordering the food, she flashed her identification, and the cost was added to the government tab. To the chef's credit, the food did smell good. Last time, there was nowhere to sleep but our seats, and there was barely enough food to go around. There are so many differences between the two trips. I need to relax. She passed tables of diners. The conversations were a mix of business and pleasure. Based on their uniforms, most of them seemed to be part of the military. They are heading to Antarctica. I wonder if they know what awaits them there. By the somber mood of some of them, they probably had a small idea. Noble wanted to say something to them, anything that might prepare them for what was to come. But there were no words for such an occasion. At least not without scaring the living daylights out of them before they have even set foot on the shore. I wish them all the best. The professor turned toward the exit with a soft sigh. Just as she was about to activate the sliding door, a shadow passed above the car. A cloud, but then the turrets on top of the armored beast roared to life. A monster. Where did it even come from? Somehow a massive nightmare creature had snuck up on the train. Maybe it had been lured into a false sense of security to come within the gun's range. But Noble did not think so. The light of the windows was obscured once more, but this time only on one side. The creature rammed the train with its hammer-shaped head. The car rattled and tipped sideways, one set of wheels coming off of the rails momentarily. Noble closed her eyes as the world went wild. Plates slid off of tables and crashed to the ground. People grabbed onto anything they could to keep from being knocked around by the impact. The train was on the verge of tipping into disaster. With all her focus, Noble helped the car find the track once again. She could have lifted the whole car higher to replace it, but that would have surely messed with the coupling of the ones behind it. Thankfully, the little adjustment was enough to right the train without derailing it. As soon as the creature disengaged, the guns and heavy artillery sprang back to life. But Noble had little interest in what the fighters were doing. She had a different target in mind. Fort, hadn't she promised to be right back? Noble needed to find her husband. Then, once she knew he was all right, she would find a way to help the efforts to take down the crazed beast. Another hit to the dining car pushed the metal box in the opposite direction. What was so special about this part of the train? Did the monstrosity want human food? For the second time, the professor gently steadied the car to help the metal wheels recontact the rails safely. The pressure of the hit was too much for one of the front windows. It broke inwards, bringing a torrent of wind with it. Stay back. An awakened rose from a bench and ran toward the breach. With his aspect, he plugged the hole, creating an invisible seal. Incoming. The scream made Noble drop the plates in her hand to hold up her arms. The monster was becoming a nuisance. Oh no you don't. She gritted her teeth. Using her special vision, she aimed her power at the large, hammered head. With all her might, the professor tried to counteract the next blow to the car. If she could deflect the creature from hitting at all, then the train would not need to be righted. Noble partially succeeded, and also miserably failed. A train was only as strong as its weakest point, and Noble became painfully aware of what that weak spot was. Putting the dining car back in place had kept the armored beast from derailing, but it had also placed a huge strain on the connection between the cars. So although she was able to slow the nightmare creature by pushing it with her ability, her efforts were just not enough. The monster was just too strong. It crashed into the roof of the car, tilting the whole cabin just enough. Not enough to cause the wheels to lift fully from the track, but enough to twist the armored box contrary to the cars before and behind. Metal creaked and groaned before giving way. The coupling between the dining hall and the carriage behind it sheared away. No. Noble pressed her hands against the window of the door. Immediately the back half of the train began losing momentum. In contrast, the front half, now free of the extra burden, sped up, increasing the forming gap. Feverishly, Noble tried to open the exit, but it would not budge. Safety protocol dictates we keep the doors locked between cars until the threat has passed, some well-meaning worker called out to her from farther forward. You have got to be kidding me. Open the door before I make you. The professor ordered. I couldn't even if I wanted to. The young man stuttered. What kind of safety precaution is that? Noble wanted to berate the worker for the foolishness of the policy, but it would do no good. Instead, she pushed past him and headed for the broken window. The awakened keeping the wind at bay looked at her with a furrowed brow. Let down the protection for a moment. I'm going out, Noble told him. The man looked outside. Are you insane? A little, but I can also float. I'll be fine. I need to get to my husband. Noble hovered over the table and waited for the man to lower the magical barrier. There are guns, one of the soldiers warned. I'll be careful. Now let me go or I'll punch through to get out. The professor cast aside her shoes. They would be a hindrance anyway. She summoned her secondary armor at the same time as the ruby tear manifested in her delicate hand. Part of her wanted to call forth the unlikely end, but this sword had more brute strength. Surging forward, Noble was relieved when the invisible barrier lifted just long enough to release her into the wild. Her relief was short-lived. The nightmare creature had selected the weaker target and was now getting ready to ram the part of the train which was slowing to a stop. The abomination seemed even bigger out here in the open than it had when she was inside. While not as big as some nightmare creatures, the monster's torso was longer than a railcar and covered in impenetrable armor. In addition to its head shaped like a hammer, two massive orange wings spread out with skin thinly stretched like the fabric of a kite. Two taloned feet scooped at the roof amid the rain of bullets. A projectile grazed the back of Noble's armor, reminding her to get moving. The engine and cars still attached were continuing to travel at a rapid speed, but that did not stop the gunmen on board from laying as much cover down as they could for the back half of the train. Soon, however, they would be out of range. That would leave only the rear half's firepower to deal with the flapping abomination. The professor needed to act before that could occur. I should have summoned a bow or something. Noble had nothing to get the monster's attention, so she moved as fast as she could toward the creature. If not for the dureness of the situation, the flight would have been exhilarating. The floating awakened rarely let loose like this, especially with an audience. But there was no time to revel in the freeing feeling. She was soaring headfirst into danger. The artillery on top of the train was firing so rapidly that the air was filled with the constant sound of explosions. It took every ounce of skill to avoid the hail of metal and make her own mark on the abomination. She stabbed the creature where its skin was the thinnest. "Take this." The flying monster roared as the ruby tear punctured one of its wings. It flapped up to get away from the sting. Blood dripped from the thinly stretched skin, but only for a moment. The wound almost instantly healed. Not good. As soon as the hole closed, the entire force of the wing crashed down on the awakened's head. Even with her attempt to block the blow, the professor went flying like a bullet from one of the turrets. Barely managing to miss the train, Noble went crashing toward the dirt. No. She braced for the impact. The armor of her bottom and legs collided with the ground. She rolled, then skidded, before lifting herself back into the air. The awakened bit her lip to hold in her scream. Her flaw had been activated. It hurt worse than being burned alive. Noble's vision faded in and out. Her body felt like it would split into 1,000 pieces. But she couldn't give in, not out in the middle of nowhere. Giving into unconsciousness would mean floating to the sky never to be seen again, or being eaten by the monster before she got the chance. That thought filled her with fear. Instead of caving into terror, Noble let her eyes swirl. Gripping her stomach, she poured as much essence as she could into her ability. When the monster dove toward her, she pressed all her fear and searing pain straight onto the monster's psyche. While the awakened could not make it experience the physical pain it had caused her, she could give it every bit of mental anguish that she was feeling. The creature screeched and then spread its wings. Its hammered head might have been impervious to attack, but the mind underneath was not. Air filled the thinly stretched skin and brought the creature to a full stop in the sky. Noble used her remaining stores of essence to hold the monster in place. With its mind weakened, its body had no choice but to comply. That was all the turrets needed. Thousands of rounds of both mundane and enchanted bullets pelted the abomination's chest, causing cracks in the thick armored hide. Before the flesh could self-heal, more and more artillery pierced the forming hole. Finally, an incendiary round streaked through the sky. "Stay still, you menace." Noble floated barely above the ground, her eyes trained on the nightmare creature. Every bit of concentration was laser-focused on the monster overhead. She felt her essence draining rapidly, but she continued to make the creature suffer as long as she could. On target, the incendiary bullet dug deep into the creature's chest and detonated. Flesh went in every direction. The hammer head of the abomination separated from both wings and legs as the creature's chest cavity split open. Noble barely processed the sight before her. It wasn't that it was overwhelmingly gruesome, though it was certainly gory. This was not the first time she had witnessed such horror. She was just too exhausted to care. Her body hurt more than she could bear. But just as she was about to release her hold on the waking world, the voice of the spell whispered in her ear. "You have slain a fallen monster, Volitant Bludgeoner. You have received a memory." For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.